Hi, everyone. Welcome to our virtual event today. Create, capture, collaborate. Your content drives organizational value. I'm Teresa Resick, Vice President of Market Intelligence here at AIM, and AIM is your host and producer of today's festivities. And I think the underwriters of our event today, Page Freezer, Papyrus Software, Periscript, and we do have additional contributions from Deep Analysis. So thank you very much for sponsoring the event, and thank you everyone for taking the time to join us today. And as we get started here, I just want to offer a few tips for participating. Because you're joining live, you can open the chat feature and use this to message with each other, but also with here at us at AIM. I encourage you to go in right now and just let us know where you're listening from. It's always nice to see, that's our way of seeing that you're there and to be able to chat with you. And this is also where Catherine and I are going to be posting some links throughout the day for some cool things like resources, today's agenda document, very helpful. So just look to there for some additional posts of things that Catherine and I will be dropping. We encourage you to ask questions of our presenters as we go along. We will be taking questions at the end of each of their presentations. And so you can do that either using chat or the Q&A feature, either one. We'll be able to get all those questions. And so do please, speak up. If you do need to step away, I encourage you to take our survey. I truly value your feedback and on how we're doing today. And so again, look to chat for the URL for this feedback survey. And certainly the survey will launch at the very end of our day today. We are recording things and we will send you a link for the replay so that you can catch anything you might miss, and certainly invite your colleagues to come and listen to this as well. Joining us as the MC throughout all of today will be Kevin Crane. And Kevin is the host and producer of AIM on Air podcast series. And he's the author of many of AIM's ebooks and infographics and tip sheets and all sorts of educational resources that we publish here. And I have the pleasure of working with him on so many of those projects, including webinars and virtual events like today. So I just want to say hello, Kevin.
Hello, Teresa. Thank you so much for having me. It's so great to be back again for another great AIM event.
Well, I love to do polls. So what I'm going to do right now is launch our very first poll question of the day. And let's see. Let me go ahead and get this launched out here. So this first question that we have for everyone, you'll come up to your keyboards, answer this. What board game best describes your capture strategy thus far? Is it Candyland? We're just starting our digital transformation and keeping things simple and sweet. Is it Monopoly? I've been playing for what seems like forever, and I'm ready to flip the board and give up. Help me, AIM. Is it Chutes and Ladders? As soon as I think I'm getting somewhere, I'm back at the beginning. Or is it Risk? You're on the path of world domination with your digital transformation. So go ahead and answer here on where you think your capture strategy is going. I'm just going to give that just another couple of seconds because I'm seeing a lot of clicks coming in here. So encourage you to vote on this. And so Kevin, how about we take a look at the results of what people said? So
I can't wait to find out what, let's see, let's take a look.
Okay, so let me end the poll, share the results. Here we go. This is what we're seeing. About 30% of our folks here that they're keeping things simple. They're just starting. 38%, the highest percentage here that that every time they think they're getting somewhere, they have some setbacks. But I'm very thrilled to see 22% of our audience says that they are on their path to world domination. That's very encouraging.
Yeah, what would be the game for completely out of the picture? But it's interesting to see that it's rather well spread across. So it looks like we're going to have a good perspective in our guests today and our folks that are attending that should be valuable for our question and answers today and our discussion.
Okay, so let me stop sharing the poll results here. And Kevin, let me turn things over to you to begin MC of today's event.
All right. Well, as I mentioned, Teresa, it's my pleasure to be here emceeing the event. We have some great speakers today. We're going to be looking at things from a couple of different perspectives, but certainly one of our most important perspectives is with Peggy Winton. And I'm pleased to introduce Peggy as our opening keynote today. If you are familiar with AIM, you are familiar with Peggy. With over 30 years of organizational and business development experience, Peggy is responsible for the strategic and the technical and customer growth direction of AIM. And as Chief Executive Officer, she leads a team focused on helping organizations meet their digital transformation objectives. Peggy, I'm sure, is extremely busy preparing for AIM 21 coming up here in about 10 days, but she's graciously joined us today to talk about how your content drives organizational value. Peggy, welcome to our event today.
Kevin, it is just so great to be with you. And wow, it's almost like a mini United Nations here. Folks connecting from everywhere. This is great. And it's not really surprising because this topic, this capability within the practice that AIM dubbed intelligent information management, more than 3 years ago, really is the first step and a very, very important step. So interesting poll results that definitely aligns with research that we have just completed. The game is changing, and I do want to take the next few minutes to identify some of the capabilities that we feel are really important and really necessary to take your capture and collaboration activities to the next step, but knowing that it's not really easy all the time because there are factors, there are trends that are maybe compounding some of the challenges. So
Well, please, yeah, take it away, Peggy. Let's hear let's hear the latest in the perspective on create, capture, and collaborate.
thank you, thanks so much, and welcome again to everyone. I think you'd probably have to be living in a cave somewhere if you're not feeling the effects of the increasing volume and variety and velocity of the information that's coming into and swirling around your organization. You know that we regularly ask our community to look ahead 2 years, and by what percentage or by how much do you think that information is going to grow? And it is almost 5 times. So 4.5 times in just 2 years. I don't know about you, but I've long since lost the opportunity to manage or control that. And as I said at the very beginning, our ability to intelligently capture this information in an automated and consistent way, to share it with the most important members of our value chains and supply chains, that's internal and external customers, and integrate it. This is key. Integrate it into business processes. That's really a core capability and a core element of intelligent information management. Some would even say that it's the on-ramp for the downstream functions and processes that follow. And if you get this part right, the rest will come a lot easier for you. So let's look at these capabilities that really distinguish or differentiate leading organizations from others, and see how 8 changing business drivers or trends are impacting their application. And then, with a little help from our friends here, from our fellow presenters that follow my presentation, we're going to see how your peers in a variety of different industries are really pivoting and meeting these new challenges, and we hope ultimately rising to new levels of content services excellence. So the first trend is that, and this is a good one, capture is definitely shifting from something that was done as an afterthought and with an archive focus to something that really has to be done as soon as information enters the organization. Capture used to be um, primarily paper documents. It was something focused on archiving that document rather than on extracting the data from it. It was something that most organizations did well after the information entered the organization. And it was usually done in the context of one or maybe just a few particular business processes that ultimately needed to be customized to that process, but no more. Um, you know that this the set of technologies that enable this have been around for a long time. They're really some of the most mature technologies in our whole space, and their ROI has been proven time and time again. But if your organization is like so many, you probably have a hybrid of paper and digital inputs for things like invoices, contracts, claims, receipts, and shipment documents, and you're likely going to for the foreseeable future. So this means that to start that process, that downstream process, you really need to make sure that those disparate paper and digital streams come together in a single stream so that you can manage it efficiently. We tap into AIM's certified information professionals, or CIPs. You know that these are individuals that have mastered the AIIM practice, and that is AIM's single accreditation. We always tap into CIPs to present this research data and ask them for their own comments and kind of a reality check to what's going on in their organizations. This was a piece of advice on this idea of the incoming capture and extraction. This CIP said, don't forget the ongoing role that paper does play and where it can logically be eliminated. Also understand that it might remain a key element in some customer experiences. So you gotta meet and accommodate your customer, but focus on digitizing the paper as soon as it arrives. And I like to always remind folks that remember that the paper you might still be pushing out is going to come back to haunt you. So don't do that. I think the second key trend, we've all seen a heightened awareness, at least some organizations are paying lip service to the concerns about information privacy and security. No wonder with all the growing regulations out there. And the complexity of these concerns really means that organizations have to govern information from its creation and automate the governance process. Many organizations still operate in an environment in which the poor users are encouraged, expected, and required to identify and capture their own information. And you might think that there's some value to that approach because they know those processes the best, and they know which activities are the best positioned to uh, be um, be captured and used to populate downstream processes. But the reality is really something quite different. In the vast majority of organizations, most users they don't identify and capture or manage their information properly. A lot of them aren't trained to do that. They certainly have other demands for their time, so it simply doesn't get done. The third trend is that automated processing of information is critical to everything that follows. We mentioned that earlier, and when you think about the scale and that growing volume, no manual process, no human can keep pace with that. So intelligent capture, that's a phrase many of you have heard, is assuming a key role in triggering and automating those business processes. That's why it's so important to select the appropriate file format for creating and capturing content based on its intended business use. Remember, don't forget the business. Don't forget the business that you're in or the products that you are providing to your customers. Many document-driven business functions have reached or they're about to reach their tipping point for automation. And that's the point where automating processes absolutely becomes critical to accomplishing core tasks with the highest quality possible and in a timely manner. And both of those attributes are critical right now. We saw that over the last 13 months. Our customers have not let up, have they? Their demand for access, immediacy, and quality has not let up whatsoever. In fact, it's accelerated. So this is especially the case where organizations are receiving documents through a variety of delivery channels. We already talked about the different formats and likely hybrid, but a variety of delivery channels. That certainly increased over this last year. So organizations are realizing that processes simply can't be automated until the unstructured information that underlies them is in machine comprehensible form. We're going to talk about that a little bit later, and you'll certainly be hearing much more about that and be offered some specific use cases from my fellow presenters. Here's a rather sobering statistic, though. On average, only 39% of incoming information is processed automatically. If you do the math, that means that more than 60% is still being processed manually. That's really hard to sustain and support. And AIIM CIPs recommend that before automation and integration inputs can occur, consolidate your capture capabilities, both at the endpoints and at the edge. Number 4, and again, we're going to be diving into this in subsequent sessions. It's no surprise that advances in artificial intelligence, AI, and machine learning, ML for short, are changing the capture game as well. The ability to use machine learning to train your systems to identify and extract key metadata and process information from those unstructured or semi-structured forms is absolutely critical to automating the capture process. And I know there's a lot of mystique around that. In fact, our latest research showed that some of these things are not even on your radar screen. So I invite you to get to know them. And many of the capabilities are already baked in to some of the applications and some of the systems that you already use. AIIM CIPs recommend that understand that content in all of its forms, not just in documents, is probably the toughest information type to make machine comprehensible, but that shouldn't stop you. Our 5th trend is that intelligent capture is key to fully leveraging and optimizing robotic process automation, or RPA. That's another term that is quite the buzzword now. And folks think that you can just implement that, but you can't without the front end, the capture piece. So the ability of organizations to fully leverage RPA investments rests completely on whether these engines can ingest and digest unstructured and semi-structured information. Automatically extracting those key data points from incoming information streams and then using that data to activate the process flows is the ultimate objective of intelligent capture. And that's where RPA can act as a bridge and almost extend the life and functionality of those legacy BPM, business process management, and enterprise content management systems that you've used over years and years now. And it also extends the functionality to a much larger percentage of your workers, and again, members of your supply chains and value chains, so much more than is traditionally possible. But remember that RPA engines will only reach their full potential if both the context and the content of the information is fully understood and integrated into line of business applications. That's where our AIM community always says that they experience the most chaos at that intersection of content and process. Not surprising. And if you get that part right, the rewards to be reaped are huge, absolutely huge. We've got a sixth trend, and that is that most organizations, they do understand the problems created by overflowing and incompatible information silos. You know you've got them. And boy, were new silos created in the rush to accommodate remote work last year. Hopefully, your organization also recognizes the need to do something about it. And whether it's finding the right information a worker needs when onboarding to a new role, or ensuring that a colleague's work artifacts are captured for future use, retaining, maintaining, and accessing this organizational knowledge is such a key strategic differentiator. In fact, 70% of you said that you agree it is critical for your organization to have an easily curated system for tapping knowledge. I think knowledge management is such a fascinating yet misunderstood concept. You remember that term has been around for years, and I always used to laugh to think, who's not supportive of knowledge management? Knowledge is good, but now the ability to get that curation and intelligence for very specific functions that need to be accomplished has become easier, but so many organizations have not yet tapped into that. A few of our solution providers in the space refer to it as organizational intelligence, and I really love that term. I think it's better than knowledge management. So that ability can be a huge differentiator. It certainly sets aside the true digital transformation leaders, but it is a challenge. It can be a huge challenge for many organizations, mostly because of the level of effort to just find all that scattered and siloed information. I hope your organization isn't one of these, but in far too many, the siloed content repositories and those disconnected applications really create an environment in which workers are almost being asked to act as human systems integrators, copying and pasting information from where it's stored to where it is really needed. And when we asked the AIM community members what was the most important reason for undertaking a content migration and a content integration initiative to remedy all of this, they said that it's improving organizational flexibility and agility. That's the number one reason, but followed by simply improving knowledge worker productivity. That flexibility and agility is a digital transformation characteristic or attribute we've been talking about for years, and again, is directly aligned to that increasing customer demands that we're seeing right now. We've got two more trends that are really impacting the utilization and implementation of these capabilities. The extension of content services to the cloud is the logical step. it's the logical step forward for digital transformation so that content is consistently available, accessible, and shareable. And that's what this whole discussion is about: shareable, um, accessibility, because of the growing confidence in the cloud. And maybe 13 months ago was the kick that organizations finally needed. That's really caused a shift as it's emerging, where business leaders and department heads are quickly identifying the impediments to their team's effectiveness. They certainly realized that last March. And they're now not hesitating to introduce cloud-based technology to really enhance their departmental operations, and hopefully that will be extended throughout the enterprise. And they're starting to recognize that cloud isn't just about storage. It's not another place to just park things. It's not just about storage. It's not just about cost savings, mobile access, and flexibility. It really represents a new, unique opportunity to rethink and reconfigure your entire business processes. You might have heard the term lift and shift. You can't just assume that something that worked well on premises can just be shifted to the cloud. You actually have to think about processes and design processes with a cloud first mentality. Business processes can evolve to be cloud enabled, and that has the potential to just enhance certainly that personal productivity, but customer experience and overall organizational efficiency, and to do so with a pretty good level of governance and control included. So we've talked a lot about the last 12 months, and certainly this crisis has forced so many of our organizations to rethink how we view remote work, how we view our remote workers, and rethink the systems, the productivity systems that we need to support them. That crazy rapid adoption of enterprise tools for collaboration and connectivity, um, the pace was just unprecedented. It provided great new opportunities, but at the same time, it also presented new levels of complexity. Because one of the biggest issues that happens when you race to adopt enterprise tools at that pace and that scale is that all the necessary steps between deployment and full adoption aren't always taken. So the result can be an unmitigated mess. And I know that many of you have experienced that with certain systems and certain tools that were allowed to really proliferate. And I know there's at least a desire by a lot of those organizations to try to mop up the messes that were created. Our CIPs remind you that you can't control what you can't see. And for one example, the problem was not the sheer number of repositories and systems. The problem was not even knowing what they had. I think that's a common complaint and a common feel by so many. So when you think about it, the flip side of all of this is, of all the creation and retention, is simply getting rid of the rot. And you all know that abbreviation. It's redundant, obsolete, or trivial information. And the ability to do that with a pretty good level of confidence, and it's got to be seamless. That's another thing that users just don't like to be asked to do. So a big change that we've seen over the past few years is the adoption of tools to take care of that for us, because of the ability to understand context. So when we look at the kinds of collaborative capabilities, so we've captured it, We've got accessibility, and we're sharing it, we're using it, we're collaborating with this content. When we look at the collaborative capabilities that most organizations are focused on right now, surprisingly, it's pretty much the basics like file management, video and content authoring. Those are top priorities. And that's probably not too surprising, again, in that race for distributed work. But there's a growing desire to truly leverage document-centric collaboration, automating how work moves through the organization to support those key business processes, particularly those for that growing, demanding customer base that I talked about. That's an area of concern and challenge for most. Ideally, content administrators and document administrators want to be able to apply flexible protection actions. And those are things like encryption, access restrictions, and visual markings. I should end this session by saying that, remember, not all capture and collaboration journeys are going to be alike. Where you are now, where your organization is right now, will determine where you should start. Please choose a strategy and a platform that is flexible to evolve over time. We have compiled these capabilities and these trends in a crowdsourced ebook that we'll be publishing in early May. So please let us know if you'd like a copy. We can just push that out, but we'll be promoting it as soon as it comes available. So you don't need to take too many notes from this session, because we're going to have it all for you in an easy to read and really interesting ebook that includes many of the same kinds of customer use cases that you're going to hear over the next hour or so from our folks, our good folks at Page Freezer, Papyrus, and Periscript. So, I just realized that's an alliteration. That's great. We didn't exactly plan it that way. So Kevin, I think it's back to you now for just a fantastic program. I can't wait. Lots of great information.
Well, thank you, Peggy. Fantastic. I really liked the summary of the 8 drivers that you presented today. And I know that that crowdsourced ebook is coming out here shortly, as well as some brand new, rather comprehensive AIM research coming out this Friday in a new information watch. I'll be talking about some of that research in my afternoon keynote. But for now, thank you so much for being our part of our event today and kicking us off. Again, everyone, Peggy Winton, watch for her at AIM 21 coming up here in about 10 days on the 27th.
Yeah.
Meanwhile, Peggy, thank you so much for being with us today.
My pleasure. Enjoy the rest of the time.
Awesome. Thank you. All right. Well, let's keep moving along, shall we? Our next presenter today is Rob Brown. Rob, are you with us? Hello, Rob.
I am, Kevin. Can you hear me?
There you are. All right, very good. All right, well, please, while Rob shares his screen today, let me introduce Rob. Rob is a senior manager, project quality assurance with Papyrus Software, and he's here to continue our discussion about intelligent document capture. Rob, please tell us more.
Thanks, Kevin. Thanks for a very warm welcome, and thanks for setting up this event. Really excited to talk to everyone today. I saw there's a huge range of people from all over the world. So good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you are. My name's Rob, as Kevin said. So I'm responsible for project quality assurance here at ICIS Papyrus, which basically means myself and my team help to deliver our software to understand our customers' requirements and make sure that we hit all their requirements and do a successful deployment of that software. There's our building on the left-hand side. I'm in that crowd somewhere, probably sticking close to one of the champagne servers. And yeah, I'd like to talk about intelligent document capture today. So let's get going. I don't want to miss my timing straight away. So to kick us off, I wanted to think a little bit about capture maturity. So at ICIS Papyrus, we've been doing this for a good 15, 20 years. And we've really seen this type of progression, similar to what Peggy was saying earlier on, from our customers being very focused just on the scanning side, electronic archive of those documents, probably just to save a bit of space, you know, all those folders and file cabinets, all that paper, you know, get that onto a disk, get that onto a tape, save a bit of room. So this is really where a lot of people started out. But we've seen them move away from that. Once you've got that content digitized, of course, you probably want to recall it. So that's where we start to get into the index data, metadata extraction from those documents, and ensuring that you can retrieve that document quite easily, so you get that metadata available. The next step, and this is where a lot of people were, you know, 5 or 10 years ago, was really to validate and correct that content. So once you start extracting data, you've obviously got the problem that if you don't get it all, what are you going to do with that document? Do you throw it away? No. You want to validate the content in there, which means extracting information perhaps from other systems, confirming that all the data is correct, and then maybe also correcting it yourself. So maybe you want a UI in here to be able to go and do some manual correction. That's kind of the middle ground. But where things start to get really interesting for us is when you start to use those documents, use that content to trigger business processes. So that document has a purpose, it has a meaning for you and for your business. It's not just to be digitized and forgotten about. Someone's sending you information, they're probably wanting you to do something, or you're wanting to do something with it. So understanding the content of that document, extracting the appropriate data from it that you can do, take the next step and do something meaningful with it, is where you start to really leverage the power of capture and driving those business processes, starting the appropriate process, and handing that over to the right people, the right team is super important. And finally, you start to get to the really advanced bits and pieces. So not only are you triggering those processes from the incoming documents and data, but during the execution of those processes, you're leveraging the tool still. You may be bringing in additional documents during that execution. You may be doing ad hoc capture definition extensions. So on the fly, by the business, extending those capture definitions within the same tool, within the same platform. To hit those types of SLAs, you know, we've got customers who have a huge amount of volume, huge amount of documents coming through, and you really need to leverage both sides of that coin. So on one side, we've got the very high level of automation. You've got to get those early extraction definitions as good as possible, as flexible as possible, and at a high success rate. In parallel, though, it can't all just be about the extraction engine in the background doing the heavy lifting. There's always going to be exceptions. And to handle exceptions, then you need to have nice, user-friendly UIs that the users can make the most of, manage those exceptions, make corrections, extract data, perhaps validate data from other systems, and make sure that the next person in that flow has got exactly what they need to continue the business process. So the recognition itself, you know, there's never one size fits all. I've done dozens of projects like this, and it's never, oh, we just do exactly what we did last time. Every customer is different. Every customer needs something different. Their documents are different. What they require in their business process is different. So you really need a full toolkit, a full suite of functionality to be able to manage all these different document types. So if it's ranging from the classic XY position in those fixed form definitions to the more sophisticated anchor points, rules, pattern recognition, keywords, etc., you're usually going to make a combination of all of these to be able to get the data you need. And we can have a quick look at how that would work. I picked probably the most simplest example I could think of here. So in this scenario, I've got my email on the left-hand side, and I'm going to start creating my capture definition. So all I want is the name of my customer, and that can be anywhere. So this is a free form definition here, And we're going to use then a keyword, and we're going to look for this keyword here. And we know that following on from that keyword, I can expect my name to be extracted. And the second one I need, so like I say, I keep it really easy, is just my customer number here, my ID, and I know exactly where that's going to be. So I'm just going to define that we can expect that number at that place on the page. And once we've defined those definitions, we've defined those locations and those rules, we're just going to train that engine, and it's going to remember, and it's going to remember. And we're going to do this with 1, 10, 50 different samples, and we start to really build up our capture definition. And as we're building up that definition, what we don't really want to be doing is thinking, well, okay, I've defined that now for my facts, but what's that going to mean for my web? What's that going to mean for my mobile channel? These documents are coming in over different channels, and these channels are often changing. We may be losing a few channels, although, you know, I think facts is still hanging on in there. I don't really think it's going anywhere for now, but we're definitely gaining more channels. So that mobile channel, I kind of do a lot of stuff on my phone now, and I don't like often having to go and switch on my PC or my laptop to do something. So these channels are there, and they've been there for a while, but the businesses are really starting to focus on them. The same with social. What you don't want to be doing, though, is having to worry about that when you're doing your capture definition. I don't want 7 different capture definitions for a single document. So we really push on having a single definition which fits for all those inbound channels. And as long as that content is arriving, we need to be agnostic against those channels, and we shouldn't really have to care on how that data gets to us, just that it is arriving. The next thing we think about is the document diversity and grouping. And this is something that comes to me a lot in my job. So when we start the project, our customers sit down with me and say, right, Rob, let's get real. You know, I want to know how you're going to do this. I've actually got 500 different semi-structured documents. Are you really saying that we're going to define 500 extraction definitions, and who's going to maintain them? Are we going to have to keep them up to date? So there's an immediate sort of fear factor at the beginning, but the approach is much more simpler than that. So particularly for semi-structured documents and even for free-form documents, then even though you may have 500 different types of those documents, the information that you're looking for is often the same, or it can be grouped into structures that you can often expect from these different types of documents. So even though you've got 500 document types, you may be able to reduce that down to perhaps 30 or 50 different groupings where I say, well, I know that in all of these documents, I'm going to have an address block, and that's going to look like this, and I expect to find it here. So there's one of my groups. I've got another group, which is a table, because I know I'm going to expect some information here. Here I've got some free text at the bottom, and in the free text, it often contains these types of words. And you build up those templates, as we call them, and we store them in the library. And then when you're running your extraction definition, the tools then have these templates available, and it goes, I see, I remember that guy. You told me that he's going to be coming. And actually then I'm just using these 50 groups over and over and over, and I can use them to service these 500 different documents. So that makes our life a lot easier at the beginning on what you need to define. And of course, in the long run, what you need to maintain becomes a lot more simple. And once we've extracted what we can, as I said, we have to expect there's going to be exceptions. So there's people involved. If there's people involved, it's never going to be perfect. We never know what's going to happen. So for that, then we need UIs which are going to support us to manage these exceptions. In this scenario, what we're doing is a lookup. So I see that I didn't get all the data I wanted from that system, but the UI itself can be connected to external systems or even internal systems, which can then look at the data that was extracted and look up the remaining data and augment your results there and extend your results, giving you the rest of the information. Of course, it could also be that you don't even have that information in other systems. So we do still need to get that from the document itself. And if you're anything like me, when you're under pressure, then I'm not very good with typing. I make loads of typo errors when people are watching me type. So I much prefer to use this approach whereby I can just select the text directly from the document. You see that we've highlighted all the different text areas which we've defined, and then we can just pick them out using the mouse, and they're then copied over to the UI on the right-hand side, and we've got our metadata. And these UIs are so important because, you know, that's a simple example, and we all just watched how that worked here. In the real world, of course, you've got people who have to hit very tight SLAs, and they've got to do this very quickly. You know, they can't be sitting around squinting their eyes trying to find out what that text is there, and if that's an L or an I. So they need to be really snappy, really fast, that you can whiz through these documents and catch up on anything which couldn't have been extracted by the engine. So we've had to think about the extraction definitions and the incoming channels. We've also then had a look at some completion work that we can do there. So let's move on to the next step and have a look at how we can crowdsource your extraction definition. So here, if you remember that first slide I had where we had pillar 4 and pillar 5, where we were talking about really triggering business processes and integrating anything you're capturing directly into the business process. That's what we're going to do here. So in this first example, I'm in my HR department and I'm reviewing incoming CVs. And here we can see in my incoming CVs, people have started writing on the CV. So this is a new development for me. No one used to do that. But as I said, the world of capture is a dynamic one. It's an unpredictable one. So we have to be prepared to make changes here. So even though I'm a business user, I'm not a capture specialist here. I'm in my business application, but I need to be able to train the system to remember what I'm doing here. So I don't need to be a capture expert. I don't need to know all those fancy terms that we had at the beginning. I just need to know what's in that document and what metadata do I need from that document to be successful in my business process. And here, someone's changed the process. Someone's made a change. So I now need to be able to find that handwritten email address directly on the page, and I want to bring that into my instance of my case processing here for my HR department. But not only for me, I want to be able to reuse that definition. I don't want to do that every single time, and I don't want to force my colleagues to do it every single time as well. So now when I've got my CV again, I'm in my case working mode, I'm doing my day-to-day job, we can use that same extraction definition which we just trained, so that someone trained for me, and we're going to extract that email address without having to do that every single time. So this is a really important point. You know, I'm not talking about capture specialists here. I'm really talking about people, caseworkers, claims processors, order management people, people who really understand those documents, people who have that deep functional understanding of what's in the document, what do I need to process that, and you take these people's knowledge and you can crowdsource your extraction definition. So you start off with a good base, but every day it gets a little bit better because all those people with all their knowledge, you may have 5, 10, 500 people extending those capture definitions for the greater good. And as you go on through time, it's only going to get better. And leading on from that integration with the business process is really critical. So what we're talking about here is instant access of that metadata, of that document directly in the UI. So even if we did some corrections somewhere else, in the processing of that document, we have it available in the UI with the metadata, and we have that all under a single roof, so a single control where we can monitor, log, and audit that entire process. So if we think about that process from start to finish, here then we're really going right to the beginning. So here I'm going to do a claims process, and I filled out my claim, I've got my document here, and I'm going to send that off to WeCare. That's our claims processing system, one that we've mocked up anyway here at least. And immediately what happens, so just with the time that that takes for that document to arrive, we've created a new business process. So now I'm in my case management tool as the clerk, as the caseworker. I see the email which I sent here. I can see the attached document. And of course, we've already extracted the metadata. So we see on the right-hand side, everything that I needed from that document is extracted. And this brings a huge benefit because you've cut out the middleman completely. So from that email being sent, literally seconds later, you've got a task in the inbox saying, hey, you need to go off and start processing this claim. So in this case, we would do a little bit more processing and we're going to call someone, but I'm not going to show that whole process. But the reduction in the amount of time that takes from your customers for that to arrive to you and in your inbox to get working is significantly reduced, and that brings huge benefits. Of course, you've got to have someone there looking in the inbox or operating that inbox to get working, but the connection between that data arriving and triggering that case, or perhaps that data arriving and being mapped into an existing case, brings a huge benefit. So it's not just the metadata that we're thinking about extracting, it's taking that data and doing something intelligent with it. So it's giving it to the right people, it's embedding it into existing processes, or it's starting new processes. And once you've got that in your case management tool, you can share that with others, you can get it signed off, you can hand it over to other systems, you've got full control over that data, and you do something meaningful with it. Because as I said at the beginning, those documents mean something. They're there for a reason, not just to be archived on a tape somewhere. So we need to find a way to reduce that time from having that document in someone's hand to someone being able to actually start working on it. And we can see that, you know, a little bit. We can see how that extends a little bit in this case here. So I'm still processing that same claim. You see I've done a little bit more though here. But in this case, I'm going to deploy the tool from directly in the case management. So I've got this image, I've uploaded it from the file system. Actually, it's in my case now. And I want to run my extraction definition. So I've selected what type of image that is. In this case, then that's it's a British passport. But I didn't get everything I need. As I said, it's the beginning. This may not be perfect. So we again can make use of those same tools which we were using before to define that extraction definition, but directly as a caseworker, and highlighting something and dragging and dropping it into the metadata is so simple. You're not a capture expert, you're a claims processor, but the tool allows you to make use of that technology. And not only are we going to drag and drop that in there, but we're going to train every time, well, almost every time we want to train the system that when my colleague does the same thing with the next British passport, that date of birth is going to be automatically extracted. And last but not least, quality assurance, a term which is very close to my heart and my role, and monitoring. You really need to have a good overview of the system itself. You need to have a tool which is also going to provide you with the information on what's been extracted, where are those documents, are they in the case already, are they being worked on, are they stuck in the corrections workplace. So having that overview with a tool which can provide that full overview is so important, because it really gives you the confidence that you know exactly what has arrived from your customers, from those upstream applications, and exactly where that is in your flow, and knowing, okay, great, I've processed everything, I've completed what I needed to do for that day. So this type of reporting, monitoring, and logging is a critical factor for any capture solution. Okay, that was it from my side. Short, but I hope sweet. Kevin, I would hand back to you. Are there any questions that I could answer?
Well, thank you, Rob. Thank you so much for your presentation today. I really like how you stressed the integration with process. I think that mirrors what much of what Peggy was saying about the confluence of content and process being where the opportunities and the chaos are. And so bringing it to that point of integration with real world process and showing us how it works, I think was really valuable. I do have one question for you though. When it comes to extraction rates, can we expect to hit 100% automated extraction rates?
Mm. Well, you sound just like some of our customers, Kevin. I get that quite a lot.
I'm sorry.
I'm going to, when we're talking about semi-structured or free form, I'll be honest, I think 100% extraction rate is not realistic because of the chaos, you know, because we're humans and we do unexpected things all the time. So if you're receiving documents from a person, you don't know what tool they use to create that document. You don't know if they wrote something on it specifically or they changed completely how that thing should arrive. So I don't think that I don't think that 100% all the time is going to be possible. But we need to mitigate that, you know, we need to try to improve that. And that's where we want to really crowdsource all the brains in the caseworking department to train that system to say, hey, they started doing something different here, but I've got a pretty powerful processor in my head and I know what that means. And I know that I need to extract that for my colleagues as well. So 100% may be a bit of a moonshot at the moment. However, you can get very close to that if you're training and you accept that those definitions are a living, breathing application in itself. It doesn't just get created and that's it, that will run forever. It's a continuously evolving component. And if you accept that and have a way to train it and improve it, then you can get very good extraction rates.
All right, very good. That is Rob Brown, Senior Manager, Project Quality Assurance at Papyrus Software. Rob, thank you so much for being a part of our event today.
Thanks, Kevin, for your time. That's been really great fun. Thank you.
All right, well, let's move on to our next presenter today, Greg Council. Greg, are you with us?
I am.
Hello, Greg. It's so great to speak with you again. All right, well, while Greg gets his screen prepared for us, let me introduce Greg for us today. Greg is a friend of AIIM and often presenting at these events for us today, so it's great to have him back. Greg Council is Vice President of Marketing and Product Management at Periscript. And as Peggy mentioned, automation technology has gotten significantly better in the last 3 years, and the application of machine learning, if done correctly, can dramatically improve our results. So Greg is here to discuss 4 areas to develop your automation roadmap. Greg, please tell us more.
Right. And actually, it was kind of serendipitous with where Rob left off on quality and quality of extraction and recognition, because what I'm going to talk about really emphasizes how, you know, the trend that Peggy talked about, machine learning, impacts the approach or a modern approach to intelligent document processing or cognitive capture or whatever you want to call it. The reality is that, let's move over to the slides. The reality is that, you know, intelligent capture, I say this all the time, is not like other types of enterprise software where you can measure it on features or functionality or user experience or feeds and speeds. It's really all about, at the end of the day, optimizing and maximizing the amount of information you can get out of documents or unstructured information and structure that at the highest levels of accuracy. And when that's your fundamental measure, you have to spend a lot of time on the data, the input data, and measuring quality and things like that. So I'm going to talk a little bit about machine learning and intelligent document processing. I'm going to talk a little bit about what you need to consider when you're getting ready for a project, whether you consider yourself in that risk game or shoots and ladders. All of this is pretty fundamental, and nothing what I'm going to talk about today is actually different from the current state. We just double it down when we add machine learning. We're going to talk about the optimization piece of it, focusing specifically on this magical word called a confidence score, and then troubleshooting. So let's go ahead and dig into it. Ultimately, machine learning, you see it more and more, and I'm not going to parrot people like Elon Musk and talk about the dangers of artificial intelligence. When it comes down to it, it's a really, really good thing. And we've been doing it at Periscript for a long time. Other vendors have been doing it and applying it in various areas. The evolution that we're seeing, and actually I thought Rob did a good job at mentioning the importance of the knowledge worker, because that's really where we're seeing pushing machine learning and utilizing it is in the hands of users. Whether that is what they increasingly call the citizen developer, or that's empowered by low or no code types of software or whatnot. The key benefits are really mostly extolled around just the lights out automation. But as you just talked about, there's really nothing like lights out. You're never going to get 100% accuracy or 100% automation, but you can push the envelope quite significantly with machine learning. And I'll talk more about that. One of the areas that is not talked about as much is the automated configuration pieces of it. And I'll get into that as well. And then, of course, intelligent capture is a very important thing. And oftentimes, I've been in this industry. I was in the industry for a while. I left it. I came back. And sometimes I think it's the coolest thing ever. And sometimes I think it's just a staid old, why is this interesting at all? But at the end of the day, it's a really important thing. And when we add machine learning, it almost becomes a necessity, especially when you talk about multiple channels. It's hard enough when you're just considering the fax machine, as Rob mentioned, and it's not going away. But when you start to consider different input channels like mobile or email, and then you start to consider all the different variances of documents that you're capturing within the enterprise, it goes from a very complex problem to a nearly impossible problem, unless you start to consider utilizing AI, more importantly, machine learning for that. But it's not a silver bullet. We see a lot more, or at least I see in the industry and outside the industry, this experimentation around machine learning and trying to take machine learning platforms and apply it to document processing. And it's possible, but it's not easy. Data science is fundamental. If your organization doesn't have a staff on hand that is comfortable with concepts like rejection curves and confidence score thresholds and operating points, you're going to need to get someone that can learn how to do that and be comfortable with that vernacular. And of course, at the end of the day, the data is critical. Data is always critical when you're talking about precision. When you're talking about machine learning, it becomes it's a mandatory prerequisite. So, when we're talking about designing for intelligent capture, intelligent document processing, you can really look at it in two ways. One is if you've got a really reliable set of formats of documents, you could probably configure the software once and do a pretty good job. For instance, what you see on the left side is a highly standardized document. It may be a complex table, but if the data is always existing in the same place and you can be highly confident that it is that way and the data doesn't vary, you can arguably you can configure that once and then enjoy and reap the benefits of a high degree of automation. What the reality is that on the right side is where we live most of our lives, on this, what I call an endless nightmare of different types of, even within one type of document, the variances, the different types of ways you can have an account number formatted, let alone where that account number might be, or the values, or the presence of tabular data that's in a nice bounded box and everything versus something that's implied. When it comes to the endless nightmare scenario, you're really going to have to figure out a way to solve that problem. And traditionally, that's with encoded rules, a rules-based approach. And that works great, but at great cost. And also at great cost in terms of upfront configuration as well as ongoing management. So let's dig deeper into what that is, and the benefits on the configuration side. This is basically a graph that, based on our most of our experience, so the numbers aren't completely precise, but this is what anecdotally you can see with a traditional rules-based approach to configuration. We could see that roughly, in a man-months type of format or measurement, to get 50% automation, and that's the ability to have 50% of your data go straight through without anybody touching it, is going to be a good amount of effort. So don't fool yourself that it's not going to be, that it's just easy. Demonstrations from vendors, including us, always make it seem easier than it really is. But the real thing that I want to draw on this is the higher expectation you have for that level of automation and precision, it's like taking a car that goes 200 miles an hour and trying to engineer it to go 300 miles an hour. It's not a factor of doubling the horsepower. It's a factor of tripling or quadrupling it. And it's the same case when you're looking at intelligent document processing. So the idea that you can get increasingly more precise and more comprehensive amounts of data out of your system without a significant amount of cost is really a big, it's a lie, okay? But this is where machine learning comes into play, because we can apply compute time and just armies of these digital workers in terms of machine learning enabled configuration and apply it without having to have somebody sit in front of a computer. So why is this effort so costly? I want to dig into this just a little bit. The reality is while we all look at documents and we really want to look at it in terms of documents and then extracted data, the reality is that there are a number of different steps along the way to putting something into production that you have to take into consideration and actually execute on. This includes dealing with all the image quality problems. As Rob mentioned in faxes represent probably the hardest case, but there are others. Mobile captured images represent their own unique challenges. And you have to solve for those before you can do anything downstream, like creating classification rules and then testing and refining those. And then once you've got classification done, presuming that you've got more than one document you want to capture, then you've got to go down the path of creating all of your data location and extraction rules and testing those and making sure that they're optimized. And then you have to do this for every single document type and every single document type variant. And what this ultimately represents is just a significant amount of cost. There's a reason why, if you measure the Fortune 100 or Fortune 500, most of them have implemented document processing or automation in one or two business processes. And it hasn't proliferated through the organization because it represents a significant expense. And again, this is where machine learning has the ability to really change the game. So the real question is, are you ready? Because if you are considering a manual approach, you still need to consider the data piece of it. And this is where we shift our focus from creating rules to making sure the data that machine learning operates on is as pristine as possible. So where once trained staff was a mandate, it's really, trained staff being training staff on how to configure the software and how to identify one value and how to classify the different documents and all the different things around rules. Now we're shifting that emphasis significantly on making sure the input data, the training data sets, are as comprehensive and representative as possible. So that gets to the last bit of it, is why is training data so critical? I'm going to go in a little bit into just a concept of machine learning, just to provide a baseline so that you can understand the importance of data. So I'm sure that all of you have, or most of you have done image searches using Google image search. And let's say you're wanting to find images of cats. So you type in Google image search cats and magically images with cats appear, but none of this is magic. So what happens behind the scenes are, and I'm just going to look at this from a very primitive set, is that you're going to come up with a data set that essentially has two types, one with images of cats and one without images of cats. And so you're going to tag those images. Images, this has a cat in it, this does not have a cat in it. And you're going to let the machine learning algorithms go through and examine all of the different attributes of images with cats and without cats to identify what are called features. And features are any kind of data element that points or is a reliable data element that allows you to reliably ascertain whether an image has a cat in it or it doesn't. And it does this in a just remarkably well, better than any human can, only because you've got to see things that typically we will not notice unless we're going through an enormous amount of data. And we all know that we get tired. And so the more data that's thrown at a person, the more errors we're going to make. But that's not the case with machine learning. So provided you've got a really good input data set, you're going to have an output of a model that's very reliable in identifying and separating images with cats and without. And so within Intelligent document processing and machine learning, it's the same thing, but what we're doing is we're applying it not in images of cats, but images of documents or electronic data. It could be searchable PDFs. The key here is that you've got to have really good data so that the machine doesn't start to learn on bad things. We all know that bad things can happen with machine learning. All you have to do is go and do a Google search on Microsoft chatbot and read the significant number of articles on what happens when data starts to veer off. I've worked with other people within the industry that have worked for other vendors where they were using and stepping into this AI realm of automated training. And the anecdotal feedback was that nobody turns it on because they're afraid. And when they have, performance doesn't improve, it starts to degrade. And the reason for that is you need to focus on really good quality input training data. So let's talk about the consequences of poor training data sets. And I'm just going to stick on these a little bit just to keep on time. This is a graph. So we're going to use the word representative and unrepresentative. So unrepresentative is a sample set that actually doesn't include documents that you actually process every day. So what you see here is this is just a sampling of mortgage documents, and you've got things like closing checklists and appraisals and things like that. And what those bars represent are the frequency or the amount of variance within each type of document. So you can see from a loan application, there isn't a whole lot of variance there. Closing checklists and credit reports, there can be a high degree of variance, okay? So that's one level of variance. And then of course you've got variance in document types. And so that represents this x-axis. And in an example of an unrepresentative sample set, you might only include a certain number of documents and exclude others. Now that's a really bad thing. But another thing that's really hidden that often happens, and we see this all the time, is that you don't get the degree of variance. You don't get enough representative samples from each document type for the system to actually learn and take into consideration different variances, whether an account number occurs in the upper right-hand quadrant or the left or whatnot. If you have a whole bunch that are on the right and none on the left or very few on the left, it's going to build a model that emphasizes the right, and that's a bad thing. So let's talk about what a good data set looks like. But when we talk about bad data, what this really means is if you design for the system on the left with this type of document and you're under the assumption that the document itself is highly standardized and the data is always going to be on the right side, but your data really looks like this, the answer is the performance is going to be poor and it's going to be a failed project. So this is what an ideal representative sample set looks like. We've got our range of documents, they're all included. We've analyzed the variance within each document set to accommodate the system in our input training set to make sure that it's got at least an example as much as possible of those documents where the account number is in the upper right-hand quadrant, the upper left-hand quadrant, and so on. So that it being the machine can take all these variance into consideration when it's building that model. You might be wondering, how do we really understand what the variance is? So one example, and I'll just pull it up here, is you can use a functionality called clustering. Now, clustering is a realm of machine learning, which all it does is really try to create logical groups from information that it sees. In this example, I've got a random selection of documents. It's not so random, but what it really means is I've got some checks here. I've got some applications, and I've got some invoices. And what clustering allows me to do is I can input literally thousands of different documents and let the system churn through them and review them, and then group them by likeness. And I may group them by text likeness or visual likeness. But the answer is just getting a better understanding of the variance of your information from different document types, like you see here. We've got label 0, which represents one group, and they're all checks. And then label 1, which represents another group, and it's a document type. These are all applications. But then we've got things like letters that can be different. They can be machine print or they can be handwritten. And then we've got groupings that are different, and these represent invoices. So what clustering allows you to do is it allows you to understand the range of documents you have and the variance of those documents, and those tools are readily available, and I highly recommend that you avail yourselves of those. So let's get back to the presentation. What does the training data look like now? Okay, training data, what it's not. It's not fake data. Oftentimes when we work with clients, we get information that is just dummied up. It doesn't look like anything that they want to work with. That is a recipe for disaster. Throw it out. You need to work with real data. What if you can't get real data? There's this thing called synthetic data. What does that look like? Let's go here. So here's a web page. So what's the purpose of synthetic data? Well, oftentimes the variance within documents or information that you want to train a system on is just really too high. The variance is too high for you to realistically account for everything. And that's where synthetic data comes in. So this is an example of a screenshot where you need to build a model or create a training set to accommodate a wide degree of variance. The benefit is that you don't have to compile and curate all this information and analyze it. You're actually having another machine learning system create the information for you. It's not as realistic necessarily. It's getting better, but it's not as realistic as real data, but it's better than fake data, which fake data is a bad thing. Another thing of what it's not is transposed data. You do not want to take invoice information and what we call ground truth data, or the actual labels, and use anything like if you're taking an amount, and you don't want to transpose it into a European amount set or format. You don't want to take a date value and transform it into a European date value and transform it into a US date value. So it's got to be the data that exists exactly as it is on the page. Otherwise, you're going to fool the machine learning algorithms. So what is it? Just like I said, it's the actual data on the page. And I'm going to show you in the next thing what that really looks like. So this is an example of an invoice where we've got the sample itself, the image, as well as ground truth data. It's a labeled invoice number with the actual value as it is on the page, the invoice date with the actual value. You can see here, it's not, we didn't add a 0 in front of the 8. It's actually what it is on the page here. And then of course the amount. So that's an example of a single page of training data. And when you compile all of that, what that exists of is file names of the corresponding documents and essentially a delimited file of all the actual values that you will see on the image itself. Now there's a whole cottage industry that's grown up around creating training sets. One company called Cloud Factory actually crowdsources the effort, and they've seen quite a big degree of growth just because you need this data. It's mandatory to be able to train a system. So let's talk a little bit about understanding optimization, or what I call the secret life of the confidence score. Confidence scores, if you're not aware of them, you will be, because they're basically correspond with every single bit of machine learning output, or almost all. What they do is they represent a tool to use when you wish to understand what the likelihood of information is being accurate or not. And when we talk about automation, we can talk about automation of the data entry component. But if your real goal is to have straight through processing where a high degree of this information goes straight through the system, you need to use confidence scores to have any degree of reliability. So I'm going to show you what that looks like. So this is a page of answers. This is a claims data set. And we've got here the file names, the field, the actual value, or the value that was read off of the image, the associated confidence score, and whether or not it was correct. And you can see here, it's a range of values here on the confidence score. And the first thing we want to do here is we want to sort that information from largest to smallest. So what we can see here is now we have values. We have confidence scores as high as 98. And we've got this value here, whether it denotes whether it's correct or incorrect. Correct being a 1, incorrect being a 0. And if we scan through here and we scroll through all of this information, hopefully shift and order and are ordered reliably into zeros. So if we were to pick a confidence score for this specific field, it would be a 71 or 70 or 71, but definitely higher than a 68, because anything with a confidence score of 68 or below likely represents an inaccurate answer. And you do this on every single field, and arguably on more than 200 or 200 examples. So this is something that you really need to understand how to do But the cool thing is once you've got this evaluated, you can plug in these thresholds, and then you'll get this a high significant degree of straight through processing. And the upshot here and the benefit is machine learning systems can identify what these breakpoints are automatically. So that's the bit of good news. So let's go into the troubleshooting piece of it. This is important because when we talk about machine learning, instead of people creating rules-based configurations, we've got machines doing it for us. So in a rules-based world, it's quite easy to understand why a system's going to make a mistake. For instance, if I'm looking for, let's say, an invoice number, and I'm analyzing this invoice, and I'm saying, okay, well, the invoice number is invoice and a hashtag and a colon, and the value is to the right. So I can create a rule which basically says, look for the invoice number label and then extract that value to the right. But what happens if we get examples where it's not invoice and a hashtag, but it's something like that, or where the value is actually below? We can look at examples and then encode new rules. But how do you do that when you've got a machine creating those models for you? For instance, this is an example of handwriting recognition where we're transcribing or attempting to transcribe the entire page, and we've got a number of errors here. I can't easily look at this, which I can read sincerely, and understand why the system incorrectly recognized it. The only way you can do that is to ensure that your input data set, again, is as representative of your actual production information. And then, of course, accept the fact that you're never going to get 100%. So you've got to deal with the verification piece of it. So is this stuff real? Yeah, absolutely. On the invoice side, in one example, we were able to take 1,500 representative samples and beat a system that was built using templates, arguably the most precise way to do something, but arguably also the most expensive way to do something. Another one, medical charts. We were able to take in, again, a representative data set tagged correctly and separate these medical charts reliably using service date, regardless of where it was on the page, and regardless of whether or not there were other dates on the page, and do it at greater than 90% accuracy so that you can have a significant amount of straight through processing. So it does exist. Again, the upshot is it's a good thing to adopt machine learning, but you've got to take the time and do your homework when it comes to creating and making sure and ensuring that your input training data sets are as reliable as possible. Otherwise, data on the output side is, it's going to live up to the old adage, bad garbage in, garbage out. And so with that, I'm going to hand it back over to Kevin.
Well, thank you, Greg. I really appreciate your talk about training data, good and bad data, bad data, and actually showing us. I really like the ability to see what you're thinking as you move through your thoughts. So thank you for that today. We're running tight on time, so I'm going to go ahead and move on to our next presenter today, and that is Gabby Kalau. Gabby, are you with us today?
That I am. As soon as
Hello,
my video
Gabby.
here
How are
Hello.
you?
I'm well, Kevin. How are you doing?
I'm fantastic. Thank you for joining us today. All right.
Pleasure to be here. Yeah.
With us today is Gabby Kalau. He is Director of Customer Success for Page Freezer. And, I've been looking forward to having a chance to speak and hear more from Gabby today, because there's all kinds of content being created and is available on websites and social media, even in chat tools, a limitless amount of unstructured data being generated. What do we do with it? How do we leverage it? What are the challenges and opportunities? And so I'm looking forward to hearing Gabby tell us about data in the wild. Gabby, please take it away.
Well, thank you, Kevin. Yeah, I know it is a trying time these days, especially when the world's been understandably very focused on COVID-19, right? But let's move past that. Let's take stock of the impact of how that world has changed, and let's look beyond, right? And this starts with how things have already changed. Some of you in the crowd might be familiar with Domo's annual Internet Minute infographic. This is the latest update, and this is every minute impacted by 2020. right? Zoom was hosted over 200,000 meetings in 2020. WhatsApp users shared 42 million messages in a minute. Instagram users were posting 350,000 stories. Facebook users shared 150,000 messages. And Teams, Microsoft Teams, that we're all so familiar with now, they signed up 52,000 users a minute. That was just 52,000 users a minute. All that happened in 1 minute in 2020, right? That blows your mind. Now, this tidal wave of data, an increasing variety of information is having a lot of unintended consequences, right? For records managers and your organizations. New data coming from all these different sources, the websites, social media, and collaboration tools. As we said, it's growing at an unprecedented pace, and it's extremely challenging to control. In fact, a lot of people don't even think that they can. But this is what we at PageRaiser call data in the wild. These days, our unstructured data are like the wild Mustangs of Texas in the Wild West. Those horses were originally Spanish colonial horses that were brought over in the 1600s and which over time were allowed to roam outside their owners' properties. Eventually, they became wild and ownerless. Today, data is in a similar position. We're creating it, but more and more, it lives outside the fences and firewalls of our organizations. Eventually, they float around on nameless servers and are just as feral as the wild Mustangs. Now, what does this accelerated change mean for records professionals? Well, let's consider what the modern office environment looks like. Right? Remote employees create documents in Microsoft Office, in G Suite, and countless other lesser known solutions. And then they're sharing them through email and team collaboration tools. They're using direct conversations and group channels and those same collaboration platforms to make and communicate and share important decisions in real time. And then those decisions are talked about and recorded on Zoom calls, which they're displaying and sharing sensitive information, discussing it, and then posting these recordings to other tools. Now, many we know are also using team collaboration platforms to communicate with external third-party vendor partners, right? And customers, like both Slack and Workplace. And I think Teams does this too, make it really easy to have joint channels. Meanwhile, we're communicating with our customers with social media and websites. I mean, this past year, your website has been ridiculously crucial for communicating with customers. Now, let's think about websites for a second. Now, it's likely to exist on top of some type of content management system or CMS, right? Now, these might also have a section behind it where there's a user login screen with data hosted elsewhere. And then multiple forms and feeds that also host and feed information to cloud-based sales and CRM solutions. Now, they might even have a chatbot from a third-party vendor. Now, how do you, as a records manager or a compliance team, gain insight into all of these records, right? What happens if your organization is suddenly hit with accusations of false advertising around content that was posted on its website 9 months ago? You know, COVID has had a lot of suits like this where information was supposedly put on a website and it gets argued by customers or internal employees, right? Or what if a user demands exactly to know where their data is being stored and used under, GDPR, CCPA, or any one of the growing number of privacy regulations, right? Now here's something that could happen to any organization right now, even Beyonce. She was sued over her website violating the American Disabilities Act because she wasn't able to prove that it was, accessible, disability accessible. Others have even been hit with similar complaints and suits, including companies like Target, Domino's, and an innumerable number of government agencies. So what do you do to rustle up all that data and make it less of a liability? Well, you can't ride a horse till you tame it. So there are 4 key things we at PageRaiser believe you need to do. 1, know your data sources. Do you know what kind of technology lurks in the shadows of your employees' computers? What methods are they using to communicate? I mean, how many free versions of Slack or Teams are running amok in your company? Now, keep in mind, you might have the official record keeping tool in your organization, but sub teams and sub departments will be finding all sorts of different types of free tools to use just because it's easier, they might think. 2, create a system of capture. Decide on what tools and methods you're going to use to take all this wild data and bring that back into your domain. There's a growing number of tools that do this to varying degrees. Some are simple screenshots. Others are full recreations of websites and devices. Right? 3, now this is important for you as records managers. Know your stakeholders' needs and what that data will be used for. Who's going to be responsible for it? Is it always going to be you, or are you going to be sharing that responsibility? And with those people you share that responsibility with, what formats do they need and what are they going to be doing with it? Where are they going to export it to? I'll touch on this a little bit later. 4, lastly, bring it under your control. Have a good system that authenticates this data with all the appropriate metadata, as you know, but that makes it your copy and your record. Once you have that metadata attached, you want to have a system to manage this and ensure it's disposed of and retained properly per your policies, right? Now, touching on number 3, getting buy-in, one of the key challenges information governance professionals face is getting buy-in. We heard from Peggy Winton earlier about the lack of alignment and the need to increase investments to manage information chaos. Well, leveraging key pressure points to challenge the status quo is very effective, right? The information governance professionals that we've worked with have managed to get IG initiatives off the ground by really understanding the needs of stakeholders and their challenges. For example, right, recently there was a Citibank case where they accidentally wired over $500 million to a customer and kind of wanted it back because, ouch, that was a slight whoops. But when this went to court, both sides of the case submitted Slack evidence to show intent during their discovery process. Now, a case like this could be the trigger that you need to start a team collaboration data initiative. If you've got Slack or Teams or Workplace in your organization, it's not being captured, refer to this. Show how important, how much that can cost your organization. Now, also educate the stakeholders about how these initiatives can help solve their challenges. I'll show some case studies shortly and what some of those initiatives could look like. And when you're clearly aligning your projects with their initiatives or leveraging regulatory, legal, or privacy pushes or drivers, you're really showing you understand how your stakeholders work. To illustrate, let me talk about these 4 case studies about how our customers leverage stakeholder pain points to launch different record retention and storage initiatives for this wild data. My first scenario is a telecom company that was trying to satisfy both internal and external stakeholders, right? Their customer service team had to contend with customer claims about product promotions featured on website and social media. Now, some of these turned out to be mistaken claims and they were causing service escalations and drawn out resolution times. Executives were being pulled into conversations that they had no business being in and wasting valuable company time. At the same time, company wanted to provide customers with digital versions of their terms of service to prove that this was the record you had on that day, right? So the solution they implemented was just an automatic archiving of their dynamic corporate website and social media channels so that they could ensure every promotional message was captured and searchable by the customer service teams themselves. Think lean, think giving the customer service reps access to the posted promotions and the ability to search for things on their own. This reduced the service escalations and the time required to get to a customer service resolution. And through the same solution, the company was also able to create digital archives of their terms of service, as well as service descriptions at each time a customer subscribed, and then they were able to provide this to their customers. All right, so that's one example. Next, we have a very large unnamed multinational technology company based in the Valley. This luxury device company owns a multitude of websites, like over hundreds of thousands of pages worth. And those pages change regularly. I mean, multiple times in a day even. And one of the things that is key to their legal team is the need to defend themselves against all sorts of litigation by proving what information was published on their website at any given time. Okay. And the marketing team also needed to understand what changes were made when they constantly updated it and needed to understand the impact of their optimizations. So here we have two key stakeholders that the records managers really want to work with. And their solution was, well, they captured a daily copy of the changes on these over 100,000 pages using an automated platform and then sent it to their own archive. So their legal stakeholders were now able to produce evidentiary quality records directly from the archive at their leisure. And the marketing stakeholders were able to use the same platform and use the records they had on hand to compare website versions to be more effective and reduce their decision times and improve their sales rates on their website. So you can see how records management connects to on the legal side, it connected to the costs, and on the marketing side, it actually even connected to revenue, potential revenue. Now, next, we have a multinational bank based out of North America. They launched a collaboration platform for over 80,000 employees without a record-keeping process in place, right? This records management team wasn't even notified of this new launch until they got an invitation to create their accounts. Now, I'm sure some of you may have experienced something similar yourselves in the past year, but this rollout of the collaboration solution had to halt completely, right? They had to get this solution under control and say, whoa, what's happening to all this data? Let's get it resolved. Their solution that they needed had to be able to capture and monitor and archive all the communications in a way that fulfilled the requirements of multiple stakeholders: compliance, legal, data loss security, IT and security teams. Right? Their solution was to archive everything, just using an archive platform that provides replayable content of their direct messages, their videos, their multimedia, and even group interactions. They used a near native viewability, so something that's like the Internet Archive Wayback Machine, and so that they could scroll through, and also had monitoring tools for data loss prevention and HR policy violations. Right? They reduced the workload to create legal holds on the data for the legal team. And by having the right tool, they were able to readily export formerly wild data that they had no control over, that was sitting on Microsoft servers somewhere, into their own legacy records management and e-discovery systems. And then with the right tool, they're also able to maintain security and privacy obligations through their ISO 27001 and SOC certified vendors, right? Therefore, here they fulfilled the needs of like half a dozen stakeholder groups. And with this solution in place, their team can now capture any deletion or edits or changes on the platform to be compliant and have all the metadata they need for their communications. And now here you can see some of the edits and changes and deletes where they were using Page Freezer to strike out edits that have been made, and you can see that, and this would be used quite a lot in anything that was trying to happen in secrecy on these platforms. And then you have all the metadata attached to it. Now, finally, for anybody here who has to contend with public records requests and FOIA obligations, this next scenario will be familiar. The US Department of Health and Human Services had the following challenges. Their public affairs team needed to provide transparency to external stakeholders, right? i.e. the freedom of information, media, journalists, etc. And they were trying to remove the manual work associated with capturing over 40,000 web pages and dynamic website content Right? As the department responsible for human services, well, they'd be amiss if they also couldn't prove their own American Disabilities Act compliance. So what did they do? Well, they used PageFreezer to make archived records of their website directly available to the public. Now, think about this. They were able to help the public stakeholders fully, transparently have access to a portal that displayed all the changes to the website. By automatically capturing these tens of thousands of web pages and directly linking it to a public link, they saved countless tax dollars of work, right? Really hours and hours and man hours of work on a daily basis by reducing the complexity of these particular freedom of information requests. The interactive captures, they behaved like a live web page that somebody could go back to on any particular day and maintain full accessibility features, giving requesters a user-friendly experience. This is what it looked like, right? So you'd be able to look on January 14th that the Human and Healthcare Services site looked on what exactly it was telling you about COVID, and you can navigate on a particular date range and interact with the archive to see any other drop downs. Now, this is just a screenshot, but when you get a copy of this presentation, there's a link that you'll actually be able to look at that archive yourself as well. And we have clients that use this link to provide transparency all the time, whether it's to auditors, to opposing counsel, or to whatever their stakeholders need. And lots of times it's under the control and decision of the records managers to use that link. So now, before we discuss the next actions, I just want to quickly introduce PageFreezer. Oh, here, I'm sorry, there was another screenshot here, I forgot. This shows some of the changes also in that archive, where we show some of the changes that were made between two particular dates. Here from January 5th to March 29th, you can see what changes were made. Right. So now, again, just want to quickly introduce PageFreezer. We helped all the companies in these case studies I just discussed tame the data from their website, social media, and enterprise collaboration content and other wild data sources, right? Generally, we help address records-related challenges, including financial industry compliance, discovery and litigation readiness, monitoring, data loss prevention, you name it, privacy, compliance. Our tools include a lot of features, including data retention and legal hold and online data security. And if you have any other information and governance of online wild data, this is what PageFreezer aims to do. So because what we've learned is that only once you've tamed the wild beasts of out there in the data world, can you take that data and turn it into something that's valuable and beneficial for your organization, right? So to summarize, I want you to understand that data in the wild is something that has a solution, right? If there's anything that you take away from it, it should be the following. Know your data sources, create a system of capture, know your stakeholders' needs, and align your IG initiatives accordingly, right? That's a big one for records managers. Now, and then bring your data under your control with a good system and tool. And when in doubt, ask an expert. Now, before we go into Q&A, I just want you to know that I'm more than happy to have a deeper discussion with anybody there about your wild data problems or sources. So feel free to use the URL on the screen to book a meeting and continue this conversation one-on-one, or you can contact me directly via email. Now, at this point, I think I'll just pass it back to you, Kevin, with any questions that anybody might have.
Well, thank you, Gabby. Fantastic. And you are talking about a subject that I will be talking about in my keynote here after the break, a really critical aspect about aligning what we do and the capabilities that are possible with stakeholder drivers. That, to me, is the biggest gap in preventing us from really transforming our organizations. From your experience working with different departments and in different use cases, you gave us some really great ones. What do you feel are the top key internal drivers today that are helping change agents adopt this kind of technology and this kind of approach with data in the wild?
That's a great question because there's a lot going right now with key change agents, right? One is, I mean, it's all around us. The pandemic, as I mentioned, really is impacting how everybody's doing business. And as they change what their modus operandi for business is, right? What their business problems change as well, right? So for example, with everybody moving towards team collaboration platforms, whether it's Slack, Teams, or some areas simply text messaging, there needs to be new ways to hold your team accountable to not just to the public, but internally to each other. And nobody's out there monitoring everything everybody does online. But I mean, as Greg had just mentioned before, the volumes of data there to go through are astounding. So you have to have a record of that so you can make a reference to it. So that's, those are some drivers. A lot of them are key business strategic drivers based on just the change in the way you're doing business now. And then externally, again, websites being that first point of contact for your customer, for your organization's customer or client, is becoming really key. We've seen a lot of restaurant organizations contending with things like, there's things from the past with, oh, you didn't have this ingredient, as you said, it was on your website, but now you said your restaurants were COVID prepared, and on your website, it said it wasn't. And we'll have records from the last entire year of some of our customers showing that, hey, these were the steps we took for our COVID preparedness. You can't tell us we didn't do what was best on that particular day. And then lastly, I had another driver there. Oh, the regulators. So now and this one's less pandemic related, it's more change in government related. We're seeing a lot of the three-letter federal regulators like the SEC going out there and asking for new sorts of data sources that people never thought they had to give before. Websites has been one in particular.
Well, you mentioned Slack and the bank transfer. I remember reading about that. Yeah. And absolutely, that Slack environment where people are talking, showing intent is absolutely something courts and regulators are going to be looking at. So what kind of retention policy specifically are you seeing for Slack content from your clients?
Oh, that one's all over the board. So we have some that are, again, this is where record managers should really put their foot down, because there are some that say, we just want it for one day, or we don't even want to retain it. We just want to make sure it gets deleted as soon as possible. Others, based on their regulatory needs, I think 12 years is one of the longer ones. On average, we see about 5 to 7 year retention policy based on common good practices and statutory limitations as recommended by different regulations.
Do you think that is that being extended also into environments like Teams and others?
Oh, absolutely. Right. If you look at legislation, you'll see that governments are required to maintain anything that is written word, and this includes electronic platforms. And in some states, they've even changed and made sure that they specify that explicitly to include electronic communication. It'll say electronic communication included. You have to maintain that for X number of years.
Well, talk about volume, velocity, and variety. Boy, I'll tell you what. And the key is linking it to those stakeholder drivers. These maybe are somewhat self-evident, but I think it's incumbent upon information management professionals to really make that connect those dots in order to really move forward productively today.
Yeah, absolutely.
Right.
And sorry. Go ahead,
Very
Kevin.
good. All right. They're telling me we need to move along. So I want to say thank you to Gabby Kalau, Director of Customer Success for Page Freezer. Gabby, it's been great having you with us today. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much, Kevin. It was a pleasure being here. Cheers.
Thanks, man. All right. With that, I'd like to turn it back over to Teresa Rezic. Teresa, are you with us?
I am here. Hello. And this has just been an absolutely fantastic session. I'm enjoying so much listening to all of this today. And just want to thank our underwriters, Page Freezer, Papyrus Software, and Periscript. And also we have contributions coming up in a little bit later this afternoon from Deep Analysis. We have Alan Pell Sharp who's going to join us. But I just wanted to take a minute here and um, Kevin mentioned this, Peggy Winton has mentioned this. You probably know we have a conference coming up. So let me just go ahead and share one quick video just to let you know a little bit more about what's in store. So as you see, the AIM 21 conference is a galactic digital experience. Just some of the things I was talking with our events team just a couple of days ago, and they were sharing with me what all is new this year. So a little bit of the highlighted in the video we just saw, but we do have some career building going on, that there's going to be over 50 sessions, including things like one-on-one appointments, a variety of different session formats. Some of them will be on demand. A lot of them will be live. A lot of them will be very interactive. So we also have some inspired partner events, and to where our partners are leaning into the virtual platform with some new and exciting ideas for delivering some really fun experiences, but also quality education. And we're also going to showcase some work from our members, people like you who, with the work that they've been doing in their organizations in this last year during the pandemic. And they're just going to be sharing their use cases, their experiences, just to help you learn some more. So right now, I want to just launch a quick poll question for you. And so this poll question we have out here, which sci-fi movie parody best describes your readiness for the AIM 21 conference? Is it you have your ticket and you're ready for close encounters of the AIM 21 kind? You just need to register and plan your arrival. Or that you're in a bit of a space jam and unsure about blasting off with the AIM community. Just let us know where you stand here. And I'll go ahead and share this with my conference team. And but I, as always, value your feedback when you take these polls. So just let us know where you stand on this. Well, thank you. I greatly appreciate your feedback on this. So well, it looks like 20% of you already have your ticket for the Close Encounters of the AIM 21 kind. Awesome. I can't wait to see you. Our conference is AIM 27th to the 29th, 3 days. And if you go to aimconference.com, in the navigation at the top, there's the agenda. So you can see everything, the whole lineup. That's what's planned. And once you register, you'll be given access to a portal. And this I just got a preview of this morning. It's so awesome. Once you get into this portal, you can customize your own agenda for those 3 days. So you can go in advance and pick and choose which sessions are going to be the most valuable for your own learning experience. And that way you can just plot out those 3 days and tackle everything you want to do. So definitely look forward to seeing you at our conference. So next up, we have an afternoon keynote session coming up here. Kevin, are you Are you back from your very brief break
Oh
here?
no, yeah, an afternoon keynote. Oh, really? Who's that? I hope
It's
somebody
you.
good. It's me. Oh wow. Okay, well now we're in trouble.
Um,
Yeah,
no, because
I
you
am
save my
here. Yes.
skin so much here. I love working with you on this. Well, Kevin Crane is AIM's content strategist, and today he's going to be talking about why successful digital transformation is not about technology. In this session, Kevin is going to explore 5 ways AIM members can get to the C-suite awareness and, and get that support that they need, and how you can construct strategies and proposals that will resonate with the decision makers in your organization, and ways to better initiate and manage change, from the front lines to the boardroom. We've been hearing a little bit about you know, the need for this and the value of this with some of our other presentations today. So, Kevin, this sounds really fascinating to me. And so I want to turn things over to you to begin your talk.
Well, thank you, Teresa. Yes, as I was mentioning before the break, Gabby was hitting on some very important issues that I want to talk about today. I think I want to share my screen here for a moment so we can get into some slides for this. Um, but it has to do with something I think that is very important that we may be overlooking. As we were talking today, we often go into great depth about the technologies and the capabilities with digital transformation and intelligent information management. We've talked about intelligent capture, we've talked about process automation and so forth, and these are all really great discussions. But there is one big problem that I think we may not be addressing enough, and that is this gap between information management professionals and what we do and the C-suite perspective of the business. Gabby talked about stakeholder drivers. And this is a perspective that has been coming to me for a while now as I talk with AIM members and practitioners in the real world. Their biggest challenge, I often ask in my interviews, what's the biggest challenge that you have when you go back to your place of business? And almost invariably, it has to do with something about managing the change, about the people in the organization, and getting a seat at that C-suite table. And I've been concerned about this until recently. We have a brand new patch of AIM research that is just about ready to be published this Friday in a new information watch, and indeed some further research that we'll be looking at throughout the year. And it occurs to me that there is some very important data in this report that we should be taking a look at with respect to this idea that successful digital transformation is not about the technology. It's about the people in the organization and how they work together as a team. And I am talking about everyone from the boardroom all the way down to the basement. Let me tell you a little bit more about what I mean by this. When we did our recent research, we asked, and this is research also I should mention that is 100% AIM membership research. These are folks that are in AIM, that are practitioners in the real world of intelligent information management. So the feedback that we're getting is from our constituencies. And we asked, what is the top most important thing to a successful information management initiative in your organization? The top 32% said it was managing change. 14% said it was developing the strategy, and 16% said it was making the case to the C-suite. So to me, that's a total of 62% of our respondents all say that their top most important success factor is not about the technology. The technology isn't the challenge. It's the strategic development and making the case that is the challenge. All right, well, that doesn't surprise me based upon the feedback that I've been hearing for the last couple of years now. So we continue to ask, which of the following is most important to a successful information management project in your organization? And again, did I move ahead? I think I moved ahead. I'm going to back up if I can. Oops, sorry, let me go back. There it is. No, it isn't. I'm sorry. We asked them, think about how your organization lines its business strategy with its information management strategy. 35%, what grade would you give your organization? 35% of our respondents said that they would give their organization a D or needs improvement. 11% said that their organization performs poorly when it comes to aligning their business strategy with information management strategies. Indeed, 46% say that there is this problem in the alignment between information management and information management and business strategy. Overall, in the entire report, which we'll read more about as it gets released later this week and onward, the average grade overall was simply a C minus. How could that be when our constituents, our peers in our industry are giving our very own organizations at best a C minus in how they perform? What grade would you give your organization when it comes to aligning information management strategies and business strategies? How could that happen? And so that was a bit of a shock to me. Maybe not a surprise, but I was surprised and shocked to see this information. So why do so many practitioners give their organization such a failing grade? 26% said that they have a lack of the budget and resources that they need. 24% said they have a lack of any kind of strategy at all. And 16% point to a lack of executive leadership. That's a total of 66% of our organizations in our industry. The feedback is that they lack the budget, the resources, the strategy, the leadership to move forward and be transformative. It's not the technology that's the problem. It's this gap between the two strategies, or the two frames of reference, if you will, of the organization. So you don't have to take my word for it. Here are some direct quotes from the research. We asked folks to give us their direct comments in free-form question responses. Things like, there's no formal information management strategy. Their information management is not part of our strategy. It's mostly an afterthought. Information governance hasn't been given a high enough priority to get on the radar screen to be able to leverage data across the organization. That's a shock to me. How can that be? No leadership alignment and agreement on objectives and solutions and strategy. There's not been much collaboration in the past. We've been mostly largely focused on risk management and no strategy to identify records that have business value. That's surprising to me, considering how much we talk about identifying information as a business asset. No thought to understanding the relevance of information governance. These are surprising quotes and findings, in my opinion. And this is just a few. There are pages and pages and pages of similar feedback in the research that I've been looking at. And again, it gets back to this sentiment that has been percolating for a while now. You tell me, getting a seat at the table is a top challenge. Senior executives seem uninterested in information management. They're not interested in any of our agendas. Our leadership thinks information management is a necessary evil, maybe a cost center. C-level needs a lot of convincing to actually free up the resources that we need. Again, we can point to AIIM research as the top obstacles for undertaking new projects, specifically all relate to this idea of a lack of senior executive buy-in and support, not the technology. So I think we need to take a look at that as practitioners, as leaders, as folks that are looking to be transformative and engender digital transformation in our organizations. It is this area that I think is in need of the most attention. So, all right, well, what do we do about that? Well, it's easy to say, well, those C-suite executives, they just don't listen to us and they don't really understand. And maybe if we were talking to a group of executives, we might have that conversation about why there is this disconnect between C-suite perspective and paradigm and information governance perspective and paradigm. But today we're talking to information management pros, you and me. So what do we need to do? And in my view, it's all about understanding that really C-suites don't care about information governance per se. They care about performance, right? They have a different lens that they're looking at. And so as change agents, if we're serious about being a change agent and really engendering change, we may need to do some things a little differently. We may need to be able to speak a little differently in different languages. And even though organizations give lip service to the ideas of digital transformation, using our information as critical assets, the reality is that most organizations, most of us, find it difficult to map those kinds of general sentiments into projects that actually get something done. Now, you tell me, and I will get into some feedback from practitioners that have been successful in bridging this gap, but clearly there is a disconnect. So what can we do? I'm suggesting this, that we may need to speak a different language. And Gabby talked about this when he talked about stakeholder drivers. So where do you start? It starts by understanding those measures, those key performance indicators that really measure the performance of our organization. What are the measures? What are the things that keep executives up at night? What are the things that fuel their success and fuel the success of the organization? And these may be areas that we're not familiar with. Like if you're in an insurance company, you may not be intimately involved with all the ins and outs of being a profitable or a successful insurance company or a manufacturing company or a government agent. You know, we're sort of in our box, right? So it starts by understanding those measures and key performance indicators that really are driving the success of the organization. And that may take some investigation and some perspective building. And then translate what you do into that language. And Gabby was perfect with his examples. Translate what we do into that language. And it's hard to do that if we don't understand the language to begin with. And indeed, we may need to speak several languages. You know, we have an executive board, we have there's other stakeholders that we may need to bring on board and engender into our change initiative, our change agency, if you will. So we may need to speak a financial language or certainly a technology language, but we may need to speak a marketing language in addition to a compliance language or any variety of languages. So it's about being educated, being professional, and being a change agent. So here's some feedback from a couple of folks that I think have been successful in bridging this gap in our newest research. Quote, "The hardest lesson I learned was that nobody recognized the value of records management unless they understood the value of that information. That meant working to transition the view from viewing a record as something that you just stored and archived and retained into a view as it having some value that you could utilize to extend your work processes and improve performance." That's what I'm talking about. That's what I'm talking about. How do what we do fuel the engine that sustains and improves our organizational performance? If we can speak that language, we can get a seat at the table and get the respect and attention that we need. Here's another quote. But I actually think, quote, "But I actually think it's easier to coach and assist and guide a C-suite leader to understand the information management perspective than it is to take an IT person and expect them to have that, to lead that function." So the solution in my mind, and what I'm getting at here, is the solution to the executive mindshare problem lies in not selling governance per se, or put any label that you'd like on it, but rather selling the things that executives care about that governance provides. So what can we do? I think it's important. What I'm getting at is we talk frequently about change management, the idea that we need to engender our coworkers and frontline workers, process owners, process performers. We need to work on a certain level of change management to have them bring that change on board and adopt that new technology. And I think that's an important discussion to have. But getting that opportunity to be managing that change isn't possible without this stuff, without the support that we need, the funding that we need, the strategies that we need, the leadership that we need. We see this big gap, but we're not doing anything about it. So what should you do? So the first thing is to recognize that change management isn't just for frontline workers, it's also for the C-suite. You can have some great ideas, fantastic ideas, but you need to educate everyone. And that includes everyone from frontline workers all the way up to the C-suite. Just as you would go to a frontline worker and say, what's in it for them? how their process will be improved, how their job will be made easier, what the advantages are for them so that they engender that change in process, in technology. We need to do that with the C-suite as well. We need to be able to say what's in it for them, or indeed what's in it for the organization. Next, it's important to be explicit about the support that you need. It's not enough to say we don't get the support, or no one listens to me, or no one listens to us. You need to be explicit about what you really want and how that will work. So bring initiatives to senior executives only after you have clearly defined the support that you need, the people that you need, the money that you need, the technology that you need. And then be clear on the expected benefits. And this might mean constructing a proposal, a formal proposal, and many people are familiar with proposals, of course. But the idea being that it may need stuff in there that is outside of our expertise, outside of that technological discussion. It may mean speaking a language that we're not used to speaking. In many times, that's a financial language. We're familiar with an ROI analysis, but a couple of tools that I found particularly powerful in my career have been things like an internal rate of return or a net present value, IRR, NPV. I've written about these in my book, Designing a Document Strategy. It's several years old now, but I go into great depth about building a case for your strategy and these kinds of vehicles. And I think that link is in the resources section. But the idea is that if you can relate things like an internal rate of return, a net present value, these are things that the accountants look at, that executives look at to gauge the efficacy of an investment, and how they relate to those core key performance indicators that we talked about earlier. Now we're talking about something that gives you a seat at the table. Now we're talking about something that is well thought. Now we're talking about a whole nother level of discussion that we may be ignoring or maybe haven't been paying enough attention to. Then from there, that's sort of the very practical bolt and screw kind of idea. But then it's also important to invest in a certain level of storytelling mechanisms. It's not enough to talk about the technical reasons why a new system should be put into place or why we need to make this change. We need to also think like marketers in terms of marketing the idea of the change in the first place, actively marketing what we're doing, having an elevator pitch ready to go to talk about the value of information governance on the organization, or indeed particular different agendas or different departments, different objectives that the organization has. So mentioning those benefits during other meetings and how they relate to other initiatives, that sort of storytelling starts bringing people on board. And then finally, we hear again and again from AIM members that have been successful in bridging this gap and successful in moving forward thereafter about the power and importance of enlisting a cross-functional team. You can better ensure success with a cross-functional team that includes users, process owners, IT support, executives who all work together with the mission to replicate capabilities and technologies found to be effective in one area, one process, one initiative, and replicating that enterprise-wide so that you're not reinventing the wheel and engendering more and more change as you go, sort of like Johnny Appleseed. We improved this process, we improved this department, we use this technology, and now we're bringing it forth. And I think our suppliers and vendors should be definitely supporting these approaches, and specifically this cross-functional team approach, because it behooves them, if they're successful in helping us put in place a solution or technology change that has been beneficial, and now we have a cross-functional team that's looking at propagating that, that is where some great opportunity lies for everyone involved. So with that, I just want to say that I do not believe that successful digital transformation is about the technology. It is about the way people work together in an organization and how well they work together as a team. And so don't underestimate the power of these kinds of things to get a seat at the table. Getting there may not be easy or something that we're used to. It takes a lot of work, or maybe a little different kind of work. It takes asking a lot of questions. and starting to connect the dots by talking to people and doing your research and continually advocating for your spot, your seat at the C-suite table, and earning your spot. And earning your spot by being able to talk intelligently and professionally, not just about the technology, but how the technology and what we do helps drive the business and improve the performance of the company overall. So with that, I would just like to leave you with thank you for listening to me today on my keynote for this afternoon. If you'd like to find me, it's easy. You can find me at the AIM podcast. Did you know we have an AIM podcast? AIM on Air. Find it at aim.org/podcast, or find it everywhere you get podcasts today. So with that, Teresa, I think I'll move ahead and introduce our next speaker. And that is Alan Peltz Sharp. Alan, are you with us?
I am with us. How are you?
Hello, Alan. It's so good to speak with you again. How you doing?
I'm doing well. Thanks very much for asking, Kevin.
All right. Well, Alan gets set for his sharing his screen or whatever he's about to give us today. I would like to give him his formal introduction. I'm pleased to welcome Alan Peltz Sharp, founder of Deep Analysis. Alan is a longtime friend of AIM and an expert in the technologies that run our systems that bring intelligence to information management. He's here to talk about cognitive capture. Document capture has been around for a while, but the idea and the advances of artificial intelligence and machine learning, as we have been hearing today, are bringing about some important benefits. Tell us more about cognitive capture.
I'm going to tell you lots about cognitive capture. I'm going to explain what it means, in fact, because
please, I would like to.
Yeah, I'm sure lots of people don't even know what that is, but it's going to make a lot of sense as we go through, I hope. And so, yeah, I'm going to be quick. You know, I realize I'm sort of sitting here between you and your afternoon coffee, wherever you are. So I'm going to keep this short and sweet, I hope. Just in case you may hear somebody else on this call. That's my cat, Rupert. He's just outside there. He's been trying to bodily smash the door down. So, you know, say hello to Rupert. But deep analysis, I want to give, the reason I'm giving you this slide here is just to give you a bit of context as where I'm coming from. So I'm an industry analyst. What does that mean? It means I study the industry. And so do my colleagues, Dan and Peter and Victoria and the crew. We've been around a few years, but I've been around a long time, as you can see from the gray beard. And we focus on emerging trends and markets. So we're going to do a little bit of future watching here. But to tie it back to the previous presentations, in fact, right back to Peggy's, which I'm going to pick up on a second here. It's not really future gazing. The technology is actually with us today, and some people are actually making good use of it today. So sort of the near future. So it's not sort of crazy stuff. But yeah, we focus on things like AI, cognitive capture, the focus for today, automation, blockchain, all those good things. And this is the important bit. We're 100% independent. What that means is I'm not sort of shilling for any vendor here. I'm not in favor of one way or the other. I'm just telling you sort of what's happening and what is happening. Well, back to what Peggy said early on. I thought this was a super stat, actually. She was saying that I'm just looking at my notes here, 39% of sort of documents, etc., information is processed automatically, which means 60% is not. That is a perfectly accurate stat. However, let me challenge it a little bit. 39% is processed automatically. Some of it's processed automatically. Some of the elements of its life cycle are processed automatically. An awful lot is not. So cognitive capture, then we're going to explore why. So cognitive capture, let's take a step back. Traditional capture. This is what we're all familiar with. Now, we may not all have some amazing industrial hardware scanning device like that. Don't know about your home office, wouldn't fit in mine, but plenty of places do. And even if you're just talking about a flatbed scanner, every organization has this today. And we've been doing it for years, and they're not going away. Paper's not going away. So I'm not saying that traditional capture is sort of on its, dying days or anything, heaven forbid, no. But what I am saying is that traditional capture really, in truth, what does it do? It captures, right? So you scan something, you might do some correction to that scan, for contrast, for skewing. You want a perfect image so that you can actually read it. And when we say read it, is it really reading it? Not really. No, it's recognizing that that's a letter O, that's a letter A, that's the word cat. So it's actually just making a really good picture. And actually, I've said here, create a text file. Absolutely. We can use OCR, optical character recognition, and we can create a text file. Here's the thing. Most people don't even do that. Most people just produce a TIFF image or a PDF and then send it on its merry way. That's capture today. So there's certain things we could do with capture today that we're not even doing and haven't done for a long time. Again, I don't want to decry it. It's an important business function. It's actually a really big industry if you're interested in that side of it. There's a lot of money in that space and we're all sort of doing it. But as we move forward, let's think about what is available to us today that we're not even using, right? We could, for example, be classifying things. PowerScript, in fact, the earlier speakers were speaking to this very topic. We can certainly, we've had the ability for a very long time to recognize and classify that this is an invoice, this is a purchase order, this is an expenses claim, this is a shipping manifest. Very few people actually use that functionality, but it's there. How do you do that? Well, you sort of read the document, you might divide it into zones and say, this is a purchase order number, this is an address, this is the amount of an invoice, whatever. That technology is there. Some people use it extensively in things like accounts payable, but it's actually underused. So what we're doing here is we're sort of looking at it, we're recognizing what it is, we're doing some classification. We may even be extracting out some data from that captured document, right? So we might be pulling out a purchase order number, pulling out an invoice, value. We might be updating financial systems as a result. And we're checking it, we're verifying it, we're saying this is the real deal. But actually 9 times out of 10, what we actually do, as I said before, is just scan it and then send it off to somebody to do something with. That's how it is. But then a few years ago, something happened. And there's some names on here you will all recognize: AWS, Amazon, Microsoft, IBM, Google. They suddenly entered this market. Now, when I say suddenly entered this market has been there for a very long time, way over 20 years. Like, depending on who you want to talk to, the ability to capture and even read letters and symbols and figures, etc., has been around 30, 40 years. But they came in all of a sudden and said, yeah, we can do that now. Well, just by doing that, it sort of impacts the market in 3 ways. One, the obvious, big brands come in, shake things up into a niche sector. For those of you who've been in this industry a while, you may remember Microsoft launching SharePoint in the early 00s and the market going, yeah, I don't think anybody will ever use that. And of course, everybody used it on a massive scale. So somebody like Microsoft or IBM or AWS coming in and saying, boom, we're going to do something here. Actually, to be clear, IBM's been doing this for a while, but AWS, Microsoft, and Google are sort of newcomers. And they're using terms like OCR. And can they do OCR? Can they recognize characters in a captured image, document, file? Absolutely, they can. But here's the key thing. They're not doing it the same way. They've absolutely reconfigured how we do this at a technical level. So I guess my talk here is a bit of a counter, not as in opposing, but just the other side of the coin. I am talking about the technology here. To Kevin's talk about the organization, the people aspect of it. From a technical standpoint, what AWS, for example, with its product TextStract, just to give one example, how it does OCR is totally different to how it's ever been done before. We've got now computer vision, which PowerScript was talking about. Yeah, we can, this is a cat, this is a dog, whatever. We've got underneath all of that, though, we have this concept. And I'm really dumbing this down. I apologize for the techies on here. Happy to take this offline and go into much more detail. But at the bottom of this, we have what we call deep learning, right? Massive data sets, massive processing power, typically all in the cloud. And you can do amazing things. Deep learning is the cutting edge, or is it? But deep learning is certainly a massive advancement. It's not new, but the fact that now anybody who's got a computer, an internet connection, and a credit card can suddenly access this and use it, that's pretty new. And that has had a huge impact. As I said, big brands coming on, using sort of new technologies like deep learning and making AI accessible. Those sort of three things, that was like 10, those three things, that's what's changed things, because it's made everybody now rethink and rejig and sort of consider, well, what can we do that's new? Well, we can do something very different. So we just looked at our world of traditional capture. It's one that's very well known. We use this term cognitive capture. Other people use intelligent data processing, document processing. I don't really care what term you use. I like you to use cognitive capture because I think it's cool and we came up with it, but it doesn't really matter. That's not what's important. What's important is that now we have the technology to actually read the content of what we're capturing and understand it. And that's profoundly different. So yes, we can extract characters and structure, but we can actually read words. Yep, but we can understand why those words are there and what context they're in. So we can put these words, we can put these images, we can put these fields into context. We're even smart enough now to enrich them if they're missing something, or to, maybe cross-reference something else. We can apply structure, we can classify. But the key thing on this slide is that word understand. We actually can understand why this document has been captured, what it contains, and what needs to be done with it. That's a grand promise and a grand claim, but the technology does do that. I will refer back to some of the other speakers. Does it do it straight out of the box? Is it perfect every time? No, of course it's not, nor are human beings. So there is a learning curve here, but we're on the precipice of major change. Because if we think about it, okay, well, that is absolutely major change for the capture industry, for your scanning bureau, the people in the basement with all the scanners capturing the mailroom, doing the digital mailroom stuff, for the technology vendors, for the hardware vendors, for the software. Sure, it's major change for them. But it's bigger than that. It gives us an opportunity now to reframe what we do as information professionals. Now, people before me have mentioned the challenge of getting the C-level to buy in. Absolutely, always been a problem. But what is the C-level interest in? What are executives who care about, paying your wages next quarter, staying afloat, keeping shareholders happy, making the company grow and be profitable? What do they care about? They care about productivity. They care about performance. They care about agility and adaptability, particularly more so now, after the past year than ever before, but they care about those things. Those are business goals and they can be measured. But if you talk about technology to them, what gets their attention? Well, they love that term digital transformation, but the things that really ring bells for them are things like automation, AI, blockchain, whatever, cool stuff. Well, cognitive capture checks quite a few of those boxes. We're now in a position where we can capture anything from anything, almost anywhere, anytime. We've looked at technology vendors recently at Deep Analysis who, with the use of a cell phone, can do really quite incredible capture and processing on the device in the most ridiculous of situations, dark corridors, warehouses where you've got messy images, black on black embossed text. Think about capturing driving licenses at night, not perfect examples of documents to be captured, right? And they're not documents, but they are information sources. So we can capture from suboptimal conditions. And here's the thing. Most things can be almost fully automated today. So we're not just talking about the capture process itself. What we're really talking about here is providing a foundation of pure, excellent data that's understood, that has a context, that is the foundation point for digital transformation, for further processing, for further optimization. We've got technology that recognizes patterns. But even more important than that, when we think about, well, what is a pattern? Well, it recognizes patterns, and when patterns change, it recognizes they've changed. So we have technology that learns and improves over time. And I think this sort of third from the bottom bullet point here is just the one I want to focus on for a second, because purely from a business standpoint, and if we want to get the attention of people in the C-suite, we're talking about technology where you're not going to them and saying, I need $1 million to buy some new scanners, some new software, and to start fixing this, or I need a new document management system, or whatever, or I need $10 million, or I need $20 million, or I need $500,000, whatever a lot of money to your organization is. And it'll be great, I think. And in a few years' time, I'll probably come back and ask you for some more, because the reality is traditional software, traditional hardware, traditional computing, basically, gave an uplift, but it costs this much, but it gives you a return. And then over time, it deprecates, that value deprecates, and then we replace it with something new. That seems perfectly logical, because it is perfectly logical. But when we start talking about machine learning and AI underpinning things like capture and document management and records management for that matter, we're actually talking about technology that's going to cost the same or less initially, but it does the exact opposite thing. It actually increases in value over time. It becomes more and more accurate, more and more efficient. That is mind-blowing for an executive if you can get that message through to them. What you're talking about here is making an investment that is going to give a bigger and bigger and bigger and bigger return on that investment over time. It's a complete sort of reversal of where we've been at for the last 20, 30 years. So it's also smart enough that it requires minimal human intervention. That's a very diplomatic way of saying fewer people. But the harsh reality is certainly when you're talking to the C-suite, when you're talking about putting a business case together, you are often measuring it in those kind of terms. Now, there are better ways and worse ways of measuring that. But the harshest way is I need less people to do the job. A better way is to say, well, currently we've got an exception rate of 45%. So let's say this is an insurance claim process or whatever, right? But something's coming in and you're capturing it perfectly accurately. But the fact is 45% of the time you have to send it to somebody to sort of, figure out what's really going on here. In other words, over 60, 65%, my math is terrible, by the way, 50 to 55% can be sort of processed straight through, but an awful lot of it, almost half, has to go to a team of people to sort it out, make calls, make emails, have a look at it, figure out whether it should go to Bob or Judy or whomever, right? With intelligent systems in use, with cognitive capture in use, you can dramatically reduce that exception rate. Dramatically. Why? Because exceptions aren't equal. We might say that 45% of what's coming in is different. Actually, there's a few things which are super different, but the truth is there's patterns in those exceptions. The AI learns those patterns and starts to eradicate them because it knows what you did and it knows what to do next time. So next time those same kind of exceptions come in, it's able to deal with them. So your exception rate plummets. You need fewer people, you're spending less money, you're getting things through the system quicker. So that was a sort of one example. And another example is, and this is a real world example of healthcare, and healthcare is probably it's always a political sort of, hot cake here in the US, but in the pandemic, it's obviously lifted to a whole new level. But the fact is, healthcare, though, a hugely important part of our world, it's also a huge economic environment, and it's very disconnected, highly dependent still to this day on things like faxes. And it's actually very error prone. To get patient records, to get billing records all aligned is incredibly manually intensive to do that. And in this example, which was more about primary healthcare, in fact, I can't give the name or too much details here, the dramatic reduction in errors, providing deeper insights into what's required, increasing automation, and crucially, really easy access for practitioners who they've gone from being in a position where they literally had to call on their phone or email somebody and say, fax me over a copy of this, to being able to pull it up immediately online. These are sort of practical examples of sort of real world scenarios. So as I say, I'm rapidly going through here. It would take more time, but we're at a position with this technology. And as I say, this technology is very real. Yes, it's coming from people like Amazon and Microsoft and Google at that very high end. But there's a slew of startups coming in, raising money and coming in Europe and in the US. And traditional capture companies are also embracing this new approach. So if you're in that sort of position of wanting to automate more of your document-based processes, and not just documents, remember, it's information from anywhere, as other people have pointed out, but still today, a lot of it is document. We have to be real about that. What I would say is, though, is in putting a business case together, if we take the strengths of the technology, which I've been describing at rapid pace here, but we've got some papers I think you can download, and you can certainly go to our website anyway and get more information. Don't think so much about better, faster, cheaper. I mean, that sounds good, but realistically, when you're investing in anything that involves AI, think about that long-term growth. Right? Is it beneficial? Does it really benefit our organizations as a whole? Is it adaptable to change? That's really important. And is it affordable? Will you pay a bit more for this kind of technology? I don't know. In some cases you will, in some cases you'll pay even less. But think about it as opposed to affordable rather than cheaper, because the benefits it accrues and passes through all the other activities of your organization are immense. So, the ability to radically transform, simplify, automate business processes. Again, so much can be done now in technical terms. 5-10 years ago, you were talking about creating lots and lots of rules. Today, that's pretty much automatic in a machine learning system. And think about that concept of capturing anything from anywhere. That's really important, particularly in our sort of disrupted, distributed, enforced hybrid workforce. We've always had people out on the road. We've always had people in the field, but of course, more of us so. And I've had to explain the cat here because I'm not in our office up in Ashua. So we're all in that sort of position. But think about that: capture anything from anywhere on any device, right? So again, think about that. Lots of opportunities. We're starting to explore many of them at Deep Analysis, but we're just part of a much bigger conversation. So change is definitely coming. But for there to be transformation, there needs to be a transformative decision. This ties back to what Kevin was talking about, right? Yes, I could talk forever on this technology and go into great depth on it. I think it's absolutely amazing. I think it's transforming our industry. And it is transforming our industry. For it to transform your specific organization, be you in the private or the public sector, get a goal in mind, figure out where you want to go. This is amazing stuff. It's not just capturing documents better. It's providing data that's clean and awesome. And why is that important? Because that feeds into more automation. It feeds into more AI and machine learning. It feeds into true transformation of the entire organization, right? So it's an opportunity for information managers to take a lead. I mean, some of the stats that Kevin were giving were pretty depressing, but they weren't that surprising. We've been hearing stuff like that for a long time, frankly. Information management is often undervalued and underregarded. This is an opportunity to take a lead, to prepare for change, and to become adaptable and a key player in your organization's future. I've been talking really fast. My name is Alan Peltz-Sharp, and I'm going to wrap it up at that. But if you've got any more questions, I'm sure Kevin may deal with some of those, but feel free to reach out to me and I'd be happy to respond. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Alan. That is Alan Peltz-Sharp from Deep Analysis. Alan, what a great talk. You know, I get better, faster, cheaper. I get reducing headcount. I get improving error rates. When it comes to cognitive capture, however, I'm still looking for more light in the distance when it comes to opportunity. How can I use it to really transform and outperform my competition?
Well, it's a great question. Here's the thing. We're talking about cognitive capture here, but it's really just the starting point for digital transformations. If you think about when people talk about digital transformation, what are they talking about a lot of the time in terms of technology? More use in machine learning and AI, right? If you don't have good, clean data, you don't have that. It doesn't happen. Where is the business critical data you need? It's coming in through this capture process, right? Yes, you've got historic stuff, which you can also scan and figure out. But this is sort of the first part of that critical pipeline that flows through your organization. And that first part has been ignored for way too long. Now we're getting to the point where we recognize if we get it right here, we get it right throughout the organization, right through to customer satisfaction. So it's a pivotal part of transformation. And I would go as far as to argue in most organizations, without getting this bit right, nothing else is going to go right.
So organizations, they still, as you mentioned, still scan a lot of paper. Mm-hmm. Some organizations outsource that, mm-hmm. you know, for the most part. How does that work now? I'm an organization. I've decided to outsource most of my scanning. There might be some ad hoc things going on that we could talk about, but the big stuff, it's scanned somewhere else. Should I just leave that up to my provider? And if how do I make those linkages?
Well, I'm going to make myself really unpopular with outsourcing companies right at the moment, but I think realistically for low grade stuff that you've got to capture, you know, fine, outsource it. But the talk here has been, when we use the word capture, we think document, right? And yes, there's still a lot of documents now, a lot of those electronic. But cognitive capture software today doesn't really care where it comes from. It doesn't care if it's a fax. It doesn't care if it's an email. It doesn't care what it is. Yeah. What it cares about is what does it contain? Because ultimately, what does it do? It converts the raw source into clean data, structured data. So it doesn't care what the source is. So in our world, there is a lot of focus on documents because there's a lot of documents and we shouldn't ignore it. But as we move forward, that sort of silo becomes just one amongst many. So you've got incoming messages, you've got incoming email, two really critical sources of information. You can apply this exact same technology to that. In fact, some cognitive capture vendors focus on that. They focus on the email stream that's coming into an organization. Instead of just dumping it in somebody's email inbox, they're reading it and figuring it out and putting it in the right email box, or not even passing it to an email box. They're actually sending it off into a process to actually be resolved.
So that requires a certain level of again, C-suite acumen or attention or strategic alignment. In other words, a lot of folks in the C-suite might say, well, you know, we scan that out. We pick a vendor, right? We already scan that out with somebody else. It's all taken care of. I've signed the contract and pay the bills every month. So what you're saying then is to really bring all of that to a hub of many truths. I mean, it's captured stuff. It's, yeah, it's all kinds of repositories.
Coming to a hub, yes. But I would also argue in larger organizations, at least, most people in the C-suite have actually no idea that there's any scanning going on or that it was outsourced. It's just such a back office activity. And that's why I'm saying we should reframe the discussion.
Have to.
If you want to talk about digital transformation, if you want to leverage technologies that require accurate data and information and insights, you've got to embrace this as part of it, because they're not going to work otherwise. They're simply not going to work otherwise. This is your flow of information that's going through your organization. If you don't get the first part of it right, nothing's right.
Another thing I hear a lot from folks is that, AI is really cool. It sounds great. We don't have any experience with it. Um, it just seems like some future world in some Hollywood movie, really, to us in the real world. So where do we start? If we're looking to start leveraging AI and some of these techniques, cognitive capture, how can I start and really realistically make steps forward that
Well,
are
the good
practical?
news is that, and again, partly because of those giants coming into the space and making services available, the reality is today, actually, a lot of these technologies, you don't need to know anything about algorithms. You don't need to know the backend math. You don't need to know any of that. All you need to do is provide it with clean, solid data to train on. That's all you need to do. You don't need a data scientist. They've packaged them and structured them in that way. So I think that's sometimes a bit of a myth. If you are really truly in the Wall Street world and you want to build some new kind of trading algorithm, yeah, sure, you're going to have a team of data scientists. But if you're talking about, regular business information that flows through regular organizations, these are out of the box packages that can be installed, up and running. And all that will happen is they will then train on your specific information and start running. So do you need to learn how to use them? Sure you do, but you don't need an AI expert. You absolutely don't. And if you do, you're probably looking at the wrong provider, frankly.
And that's what we've been talking about. The developments in AI and machine learning are starting to make things practical and achievable. And indeed, maybe start leveraging some of the underused or unsung data that is already being maybe captured already.
Absolutely. I mean, just on a final note there, you say that sort of under leveraged stuff. I mean, we literally know of organizations who have, and I'm not exaggerating, by the way, 10 to 20 billion documents in storage. Why? I have no idea.
Yeah.
Right. So, I mean, there's no lack of stuff. And if you've got it, get rid of it if it's junk, but start leveraging it if it's not. I mean, it's a resource that's sitting there, but it needs not AI professionals, it needs information management professionals. That's what it needs. They're the people who understand what's there, how it's structured, and then the technology can come in and make use of it.
All right, very good. That is Alan Peltz-Sharp, founder of Deep Analysis. Get his analyst brief, The Dawn of Cognitive Capture, in the resources section. It's awesome. Alan, thank you so much for being a part of our event today.
Thank you.
All right, well, with that, folks, I'm going to turn it back over to Teresa. Teresa, are you with us?
I am. And this has been such a really awesome lineup of presenters, so many cool things that I've been learning today. And I just find so much value in listening to these presentations. So, first of all, I do want to thank the underwriters that we have with us. And so, our underwriters, Page Freezer, Papyrus Software, Periscript, Deep Analysis. And as I had mentioned before as well, that you heard us share numerous times earlier today about the AIIM conference that's coming up, aimconference.com. Shelley Archambault and Eric Qualman are two of our keynote presenters, and I've had the pleasure of seeing an Eric Qualman presentation somewhat recently, and he's such a dynamic speaker. And so I'm really looking forward to the lineup that we have at AIIM conference. And so a couple of things that just as I wrap up with some of our, for me, some next steps, some key takeaways that I'm getting from out of all of this. And before I go in to talk a little bit more of that, Kevin, you've been also listening to this very intently, and you've been interviewing every one of our presenters today. I want to give you the opportunity to go in and offer some of your closing thoughts, key takeaway, those most valuable things that you've been learning from our presenters today.
All right. Well, it's been really a kind of a wild and varied event today. I think we've touched on some really important things and some topics that sort of came out that I didn't expect. What I really liked about what Peggy said this morning was the idea of looking at the confluence of process and content. We hear again and again, that is where the opportunity, that is where the chaos is. And we're seeing a shift in perception in many organizations, shifting away from simply a store and protect mindset to one that is more driven about customer performance, customer expectations, and satisfaction, and organizational performance. Um, and looking at the document as a construct for that. Certainly Rob Brown talked about integrating with process and he really showed us how intelligent document capture can help. And Greg Council, again, a great, really practical session talking about the getting good data to drive good process. I thought it was incredible. But Gabby Clow, I thought was for me perhaps the most inspiring today because, well, he talked about what I talked about, and that was the idea of getting stakeholder drivers involved with what we do and bridging that gap between information management and business strategy. And really looking at data from new areas that perhaps we haven't considered, and including that in our work with intelligent information management. And then, of course, Alan Pelt Sharp, you know, underused data, underused opportunity, really looking at these tools now as transformative vehicles as opposed to something that is just mitigating risks. We continue to have these types of discussions. I am looking forward to the release of the Information Watch coming this Friday, where we'll be able to present some more of the data that we have found recently with AIM, and then certainly following that up with AIM 21 coming up here in just a few days. So we continue to have these really important discussions. I would recommend that that our listeners do turn to AIM as a resource for research and learning. We have a great deal of wonderful resources in the resources section today for this session, but also at aim.org/resources. That I think is an important resource that we should encourage everyone to use as we continue to have these types of discussions.
Yeah, and for me, what I found really inspiring with all of this is because we did hear a variety of more than just tips and tricks. It's so much more than that, but just a variety of perspectives, but just very tangible and practical things to consider to help you have those conversations with your colleagues, with your bosses, with, for getting the right teams together. And I challenge you just to pick one thing that you heard today that most inspired you and talk to it with your teams, with your colleagues. You just try to do that one thing, get started.
And don't be afraid to really talk with suppliers and providers like the ones that were with us today: Page Freezer, Papyrus, Parascript, and of course Alan Pelt Sharp from Deep Analysis. These are all great knowledge leaders in our field. So really, these and others really help lead the way with technologies and can assist in building strategies and giving us the information that we need to be change agents moving forward.
And we are at the end of our time today. We said we would end by 2:00 Eastern time. It's just about 2:00, and I really enjoyed listening to all of this. And information in our organizations, that information and data is one of our most valuable assets. And there's just so much to learn, but there's so much opportunity, not only how AIM can help you with those learning experiences, but also on the opportunity to help your organization be the best that it can be, so it can get down to the business of what you guys do. And to me, take advantage of what AIM has to offer. But there are so many ways that you can go about in with having your organization be its best. That's my key takeaway from today. Kevin, I just wanted to know if you have any last thoughts yourself.
Well, I'll just put one more plug in for the AIM on Air podcast. Did you know that we have a podcast that comes out twice a month, AIM on Air? You can find it at the AIM website or everywhere you find your podcasts now. Folks like Alan Pelt Sharp, folks like our panelists today, folks like Peggy Winton and others have all been on the show. We explore these topics and others. So I would recommend that as a resource for all of us. And I'll see you there or hear you there. Maybe you'll hear me. I don't know what we'll do. But anyway, thanks again, Teresa, for having me on this event today. It's been my pleasure.
Well, thank you, Kevin, and everybody in our audience. Thank you for your time and your participation today. I value that you've just carved out so much time to be with us, and I look forward to seeing you in a couple of weeks at the AIIM conference. So we'll see you there. Have a great afternoon.